Lucky night. It's a Tuesday night, and because we're in budget season, you get 2 meetings for the price of 1. Count your lucky stars. We were here till 10 last night. I suggest that we not do that tonight if we can avoid it. So,
push for 11. Push for 11.
with us online, we have Councilmember Owen and also Councilmember Tidswell. So, welcome to both of you. Kevin will be looking for your little golden hand, but if you're not being recognized at any time, please feel free just to talk, and we'll hear you and make arrangements. So for anybody who does not have one and is interested, there should be a copy of the agenda back on the cart there. Before we get into our item budget presentations tonight, we'll have an opportunity for public comment. So if anybody would like to make public comment on any item, whether it's on our agenda or not, you've got an opportunity to do so right now. Just come to the podium and we'll give you 3 minutes and ask for your name and address. Is there anyone with the public who'd like to make public comment at this time? No one is coming forward here in City Hall, and no one is with us online. So we will close the public comment period. And before we kick off with item number 1, I'll just ask our city administrator, Chris Kukulski. Chris, do you have anything in the way of preliminaries for us?
I'm waiting for my button here. All right. Sorry, Mayor. No, I don't, other than the order. If we could please do building first and then follow that up with parks, planning, and TIB, tourism business. So if we could just flip building and parks, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Easy to do. Council, the building PowerPoint was the last item in your packet if you're looking for that. So that's where we'll start. And with that, who is our presenter? Jessica, welcome.
Is that on, Chris?
Yes, it is. Thanks for checking.
Okay. All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Jessica Fust, the building official, and I'm excited to be here to present the building division budget for FY24. Is that not working? Go up and down.
I'll run it for you.
Okay. We go back to the first one. I can talk about our mission. All right, the building division mission is to ensure the safety, security, and health of Billings citizens and visitors through building code enforcement. Next slide. We provide many services to the construction industry and homeowners. We provide comprehensive permitting, plan review, and inspection services. We provide building records management for the city. And we review and inspect buildings throughout the community based on the state building codes, which include commercial and residential buildings. We look at structural, plumbing, mechanical, electrical, energy efficiency, accessibility, and we do look at public pools and spas. So I get to lead a team of 16 staff. There's myself, the deputy building official who oversees the permit techs and the plans examiners. The senior inspector oversees our combo inspectors, our electrical inspectors, and we have a plumbing inspector. And then I also have an office admin and then a records admin. So some highlights from FY23. We spent a lot of the fiscal year working on selecting a new software program for permitting, plan review, and inspections that will replace our current software and will be used by multiple city departments. The City of Billings adopted the 2021 building codes in September of 22 after the state did earlier in the year. And we held a public informational meeting on significant code changes for designers and contractors. The photo on the right is from one of those meetings that we had over at the Stillwater Building, and you may see a council member there in the front row. We also continue our monthly meetings with the Billings Home Builders Association to share information and address concerns. That has really been positive, and we've gotten a lot of good feedback on that over the last year. So for staff highlights, we've done a lot of training. Our building division staff attended over 300 hours of training last year. We have staff that have gotten a lot of certifications. A lot of our staff are newer, have only been with us for a few years, and so they're really working hard to get certified in all the different disciplines. So staff obtained or renewed over 15 certifications last year. We did have a creation of a records admin position, so a lot of our work has to do with records and paperwork. A lot of it is digital, but needing somebody who can really focus on the way that we're creating records, processing records, and retaining records was really important for the division, so we created that position. We did issue over 3,100 permits in calendar year of '22. So when I do talk about permit statistics, it is going to be based on calendar year, not fiscal year, just because that is the way that we track building permits is by calendar year. Our total construction valuation for '22 was nearly $500 million, which is $140 million more than the total from the year previous. So we did look at some statistical trends over the last 5 years. So looking at single-family homes, we really had an uptick in '21. It did come down a little bit in '22, but '21 we had nearly 430 single-family home permits issued. You can see the spike in March of '21. That was our largest number of permits issued for single-family homes in a month in the history of the building division. So that's a pretty neat number. And then we had 22, in '22 we did drop off a little bit. The next one. So this is looking at multifamily units. So over a 5-year trend, we looked at how many multifamily units are we adding to the housing stock. So that is everything that's not a single family home. So it's duplexes, townhomes, and apartment buildings. So you can see in 19 and 20, we didn't have a whole lot, and then we had a big spike in calendar years 21, and then not as many in 22. But I think the takeaway on this is that over the last 2 years, we've added over or about 1,600 units, dwelling units in the city of Billings. This is looking at the trends on commercial construction valuation. So as I noted earlier, there was a pretty significant increase in valuation of our permits from 21 to 22, and the biggest, or I guess it can be attributed mostly to commercial construction. Valuations really went up in 22. A lot of it is just the construction cost and inflation that we saw, but also we just had a lot of activity in the city. So looking at our revenues, building division revenues are projected to be $2,643,000, which is about $5,500 less than last year's budget. Last year's construction activity was about as expected, and while construction is continuing strong, we have seen a cool off in the number of single-family home permits. Revenues are based almost entirely on plan review and permit fees, which are calculated based on project valuations. The equation that we use to calculate those fees has been in place since the 1990s. So as valuation of construction goes up, then the fees we collect also go up. Building division expenditures are anticipated to be down $717,677 from FY23. Personal service costs have increased due to step increases, cost of living adjustment, and the addition of 1 FTE. But the significant decrease in expenditures is due to large one-time expenses that we had in FY23, including our software investment, which was over $500,000. We had 2 vehicle purchases, and then also a transfer of just over $300,000 to facilities for the new City Hall build-out for the building division office space over there. Our building division goals for this next fiscal year include implementation of the new software, increasing the number of certifications that each of our inspectors and plans examiners hold and provide training opportunities, continue to provide timely and consistent plan review and inspections, and a continuation of digitizing all of our paper plans so that we don't need to move very much paper over to the new city hall. And with that, I would love to open it for questions.
All right. We'll start in the middle because we were one end and one end. We'll start in the middle this time and wrap around. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have a question about your budget sort of description. In here it mentions legislation to increase the reserve limit from 12 months to 36 months. Did that legislation pass, and how is that going to impact you? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilmember Joy. Yes, that legislation did pass. It was signed by the governor, so we are expecting it to go into law here. And by having 36-month reserve available, it gives us more opportunity to sort of plan ahead for budgetary concerns. So one of the reasons why we had, I would say we're always really conscious, and in years past, we've actually dropped permit fees if our reserve was getting too big. And so it does give us a better opportunity, though, to plan ahead in terms of having funding for the division.
Jessica, what are you expecting for permits in 2023? The 22 numbers were a little over 300 for single family, around 600 for multifamily, so around 900 for the whole year. What's 23 going to look like?
Thanks for the question, Mayor Cole. The numbers that we're seeing so far this year are really mirroring 22. So obviously we have data from January through April of this year. It's still we're still seeing a lot of growth in the multifamily. We have more multifamily units that have come in for permit since, the end of last year. So that's still looking strong. I would say the single family homes are similar to what we saw last year. So I would anticipate we'll be around that 350 for single family permits for this year as well.
Okay, and we're always concerned about if we're falling behind or getting ahead on the lack of housing problem that we have. Mm-hmm. And our growth rate is between typically 1.5%, a little over 100,000 people. So that's an extra 1,000 to 1,500 people coming into our community every year. And so if we're generating about 1,000 units at roughly 1.5 people per unit, I don't know what, maybe we use a little over 2. Are we getting ahead? Are we keeping up? Or we're falling behind? Can you give a big picture there?
I'm not sure that I can speak intelligently about that, Mayor Cole. I can see where our permits are trending, but not really knowing how many units we do need. And maybe Wyeth can speak more to the number of subdivisions or other developments that are coming down the line.
Okay, thank you. That's kind of the ultimate question, and my sense is that we're not really falling behind, we're not really getting ahead, but we're kind of keeping up with the problem. We're not getting worse, would be my guess. So, Councilmember Trickey or Purington?
Good.
Okay.
So thank you, Jessica. And I'm really pleased. I do get good comments from the Home Builders Association, so I think that transition has worked nicely. Also, the training for your inspectors, I think, is good, because that was always one of the big comments, was that they didn't know what they were inspecting, they didn't have the skill set. So I think that's great to be training these people to do that. I think there was a push also in the legislature for having the, I don't know who you, I don't know the terminology, but it's those builders, developers, they have their own electricians, they have their own plumbers, and it was kind of like they were having a double duty of having the city charge and have an inspector come out, whereas they have to have their own inspectors. Is that a dual job? Is that something that we are still doing? I don't know that anything passed in the legislature regarding that, but I know it was an issue at one point.
So Councilmember Purinton, I don't know of any legislation that had to do with electrical inspections. So if any electricians are doing a project in the city, they'll get inspections from our electrical inspectors. If they're doing inspections in the county, they would get inspections from the state inspectors.
Okay.
So I don't know of any double inspections that would have to happen.
So I think that was the issue was because of the timing, that it just took more time to wait, to have someone from the city come and do those inspections before they, could move on. So you don't really see that as a time gap for those in construction to have to wait on a city inspector?
So Councilmember Purinton, we very consistently do inspections the next day. So I would say 98% of the time, if you get your inspection in by 4 p.m., you're going to have an inspector out on your job site the next day.
Good.
So we definitely don't want to hold up any projects.
And I'm sure they don't want you to either. So I have one more question, Mr. Mayor. So one of the things that I hear from some of the developers and some individuals that, have built their own homes is the fees that are charged, building permits and whatever fees come, I don't know, out of, I always thought, I probably need to sit down and just look and see what is charged with every home or apartment building that's built, because I honestly don't know that. But my question is, we do get a lot of people that are building in the county because they don't want to pay city fees. Of course, there's trade-offs for that. But I think I don't remember for a while, and I've seen it before, but we haven't seen it for a while. What is the difference in our fees compared to, say, the county, Laurel, and maybe some other communities that are about our size? How do we fare with other communities regarding permitting and costs?
Sure. So Councilmember Purinton, single-family homes that aren't in a certified jurisdiction aren't required to get permits through the state. So they would have no building permit fee. They still need to get electrical and plumbing permits for those disciplines. So our permit fee on a single-family home, I would say roughly is about $1,500 to $1,600. And that includes reviewing the plans, completing all the inspections, getting them their CO. And a lot of the fees that are included in a new build are the system development fees for sewer, water. And so that can add to that kind of bottom line of what it's actually going to cost. There's also a fee from engineering for their plan review. There's a fee from planning for their plan review. So there's a number of fees that, we could certainly give you a snapshot of here's a typical home, here's the fees that they're going to see, if you'd like me to email that to you.
Sure, because I think you said in your presentation, a lot of times those are based on valuation of the property.
Correct.
So if you have a $500,000 home, which is a little bit above what our median is, what would those fees look like? And then the other part of that question is, what does that look like across, other local communities, Laurel, for one, and then maybe other communities in the state?
Sure. So Councilmember Purinton, I'm not sure what Laurel is at, but last year I did a survey of the other large cities in Montana, and ours was consistently lower. We were almost half the cost of a permit in Bozeman for a similar sized home. So you're welcome.
Thank you. Councilmember Tidswell, we're on Ward 4. If you've got any questions, otherwise we'll go on to Ward 5.
I'm good, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Boyette? Or?
Thank you. In our reading, it says the latest audit shows that the building division exceeds the state mandated reserve limit, but there was going to be something in the legislature. Can you expand on that about what happened or not happened?
I think that's probably the same issue we were talking about, Councilmember Joy,
Correct. That was
that passed, right?
Yes, that was the question that Councilmember Joy asked. They extended the 12-month reserve to a 36-month reserve.
Okay.
So once that goes into effect, or I don't know if it may have gone into effect, but it's in the process of
But
being.
for the last 3 years, we've always exceeded it.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Yes.
obviously we're charging too much somehow. And I'm just not that it, I just was thinking about that I talked to a builder the other day and he was commenting on the costs and I said, okay, but tell me what they were, and he said he would get back to me. So when that happens, I'll come and visit with you. How's that?
Sure, absolutely.
Councilor Ripsis?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jessica. I wanted to talk about this. The equation that we use to calculate fees has been in place since the 1990s. It seems pretty old. I'm not sure if anything's changed in the construction industry since the early 90s, but it probably has. And anytime you have an equation that calculates fees, there are some winners and losers and incentives and disincentives. So what does that equation look like? And is it rock solid, or are there things that we should be considering with that equation to maybe try to incentivize more projects or different projects or something like that?
Sure, thank you for the question, Councilmember Rupsis. So the equation is actually the same one that the state uses, and we adopted it by ordinance back in the 90s. And actually it's sort of the standard, a lot of cities nationwide use it. It's the UBC calculation that would have been done. But yeah, it was from the 1996 UBC. But it gives you your range of valuation, and then it says, for every $1,000 a project, you pay, $1.50 in fee or whatever that calculation is. And then as the project gets larger, your cost per, reduces. So once you're over $1 million, then every additional 1,000 or 10,000 will be less than if you just had a $10,000 project.
Okay, Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you. I was just wanting to ask you about the SEPTED training next week. Do you have someone from the building division going? Are you going? This seems like a important thing for building to be part of.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Shaw. So I was signed up to go, and then I decided to go to Belize instead. So I have transferred my membership, my cost of going to someone else, to one of my plans examiners.
Okay, so somebody from your staff is going. Okay, that's great. And have a great trip.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gulick? Although here's a trick question. What is the official language of Belize?
It is English.
Very good.
She's done her homework before going.
The old British Honduras. Councilmember Gulick.
I guess building on what Councilmember Rupsis was talking about, if there's a surplus in reserves, is there any statute that allows for waiving of permit fees for certain project types? This would be, if this was a policy tool, for instance, that the council wanted to do. I'm not saying that I'm necessarily advocating we do it or something like that, but if it were a policy tool we want to do, would statute allow that?
So, Councilmember Gulick, I believe so. So we have the ability to, and I know we talked about this last year when we were over, was that we would just do sort of a blanket reduction in fee. So everyone would get a 20% discount for however many months to bring our reserve back down. And we were going to look and see how we're doing this spring, because we did hear, at the end of last year, it was all doom and gloom and everything's going to stop, and construction costs and inflation and all that. And we really haven't seen that, especially on the commercial side. We still have very strong construction happening. So if our revenues continue the way they're going, we would look at what sort of reduction. And in the past, it's been specific types of permits. But I believe that under state law, it should be proportionate to who's actually paying the permit fees. So I think a blanket reduction would be the best policy.
Maybe a follow-up is that probably is the most equitable, and can we be discriminatory? And that is that we decide there's a certain project type we want to see happen more in the city if we decided that, and can we reduce fees just for that particular project type?
I think I would have to research that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
That would be allowable.
Thank you. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. Jessica, I would be interested in hearing if whether that's something we can do or not. And Councilmember Shaw asked my question about subted, so I'm glad that you're incorporating into the division there. So the only other question I had is, again, I get people from time to time asking me and complaining about the inspection of this or that. And so I think we talked last year about this is, have you looked at any way to do some type of surveying, a third-party surveying, to find out from the people who are using the service, like a customer service survey, to see what's going on, from outside, a third-party viewpoint, without them feeling they're going to be attacked or have retribution against them because they reported an inspector for doing something? Because that's the fear of the builders.
Thank you, Councilmember Neese. So, yes, after last year's discussion where we talked about this, we did spend a lot of time looking at what options we had to do a survey like that. The issue being that if it's anonymous, you can't have the follow-up question of who, what exactly happened. Are we really getting a good picture? Are we getting an unbiased view of the service that we're providing? Anytime you have a regulatory service, this isn't a traditional customer service where we're providing the builder a service. We're actually providing the future occupants of that building a service. So are we serving the future occupants and saying, are you pleased with the way this building is built? Instead of, and so I find it difficult to really get a true understanding of, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing if contractors are the only ones that we're serving?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilmember Owen, do you have any questions?
I do, just two, Mayor, thank you. Jessica, I kind of want to follow up on what Councilmember Neese was just talking about. I think, at least based on what I hear in the community and kind of the understanding that I'm gathering, that the interaction between inspectors and project developers is pretty arm's length. They submit the plans, they're told if they comply or not, and if they don't comply, they're told what they don't comply with. But I think for smaller businesses, for businesses that maybe don't have a lot of money, for architects or professionals, that sort of back and forth process can be really expensive. And so I understand the need to have a sort of oversight, inspection, separation, but have you given any thought to sort of a customer service person or an ombudsman type or a resource person, particularly for small businesses, people trying to move into downtown businesses and bring up to code? Have we thought about doing anything to bridge the gap where people really are struggling to comply with building codes?
Yeah, so Councilmember Owen, we do spend a lot of time working with especially those small business owners, and then I would say homeowners. A lot of times when plans come in and homeowners are doing their own plans, we will comment and say, here's what you need to do, here's what we're gonna look for in inspections. We're not gonna say, you need to go get an architect, you need to go get an engineer if it's simple. Some of the downtown buildings aren't simple, just because of the age and the complications and maybe what's been in there before. And so it really is a line where we can't tell them how to design it. We can tell them, if you're gonna use it for this, it needs to have A, B, and C, but there's multiple ways to get to A, B, and C. And we don't want to step in the shoes of a designer who would have to weigh those different options and really give them a good recommendation. So when it's simple enough that we can give a recommendation, we certainly do. But a lot of times, especially in those downtown buildings, there's just a lot of complications that we can't take on that liability of telling them how to do it.
Fair enough, but I think as you continue to plan for budget resources in coming fiscal years, I would continue to look at that customer service aspect of it, because I do think there continues to be maybe some points of friction. Which sort of leads into my second question. When we looked at this budget in the budget committee, we noted the one new FTE, and the explanation given was that we needed a new person almost entirely for the St. Vincent renovations. And I'm just wondering if that's accurate, and why we would add a permanent position for a project that will at some point be complete.
So thank you, Councilmember Owen, for that question. That FTE was originally slated to be a combination inspector. We had it open for 6 months. We got one qualified applicant. We offered him the job and he didn't want to move here. So we had to rethink our strategy. So one thing is that our inspectors each spend a lot of time every day doing paperwork, recording inspections, corrections, having those, a lot of paperwork. And so their time is better spent out in the field actually doing the inspections. So that's why we created the record specialist, is to take that time away from them so they could have more inspection time back, so that they could complete more inspections. We could have somebody else dedicated just to the record keeping and the record organization. Now, when it comes to the St. V's replacement hospital project, that is that project is gonna be over 500 million, which was our valuation for all of our permits for last year. So that is well out of the realm of our capacity at our current staffing levels. So my plan is to hire a third-party inspection service that is going to be managed. We'll go out for RFP this fall and hire a third-party inspection service, and they will handle the inspections under under the umbrella of the building division. They will either handle the inspections for the hospital, or they will augment the other parts of our division so that we can handle the inspections for the hospital, because we do know it will be a lot of work on our division's part.
And that cost is reflected in the fiscal year 24 budget proposal?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, council. I like the idea of a survey just because there's problems with it. I guess I'll just comment that even though, and I don't know that it has to be anonymous, there's some who might not fill it out, but if you lose those 3 or 4%, you're still getting the 97, 8% or 6% or something. So anyway, I would just personally encourage you to think about that one more. There's always going to be reasons not to do something. So if that has other value. But let's go to public comment. Councilmember Purington, before we do.
Yeah, just real quickly, they did do a survey last year. I mean, it was an online survey, it was anonymous. It did generate some changes, I think.
Yeah, we received a copy of that, and it was basically just a comment type of survey. Very difficult, I guess, to get any true, feedback on it. And I believe the Home Builders Association did that one. Maybe I'm off on that, but.
I think it was that kind of generated through that one, yeah.
Is that one? That was just a bunch of comments. I think that's who did it, but I'm not sure.
So just going back to the cost thing, where is that cost for that third-party inspection service? Where is that in the budget?
I believe it's in our operations cost. It wasn't a separate line item.
Because you had 12.5 for an increase in your budget from last year. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's open up for public comment. Is there anybody who would like to be heard on this bullet point? There's nobody present here to do that. There's no one available online, so we'll close the public comment on this sub-item. Before we move on to the next bullet, anything else from council members? Councilmember Gulick?
Yeah, thank you. I think following up with what Councilmember Owen was saying, yeah, I think maybe if we did use some of the surplus we have, our reserves we have, what we see at our office, and the building division does refer a fair number of folks our way because we know the existing building code, and we see a lot of the projects as sort of like a public service. Someone's got to do it, and because we want the vitality of our community, we're just so busy, it's really hard to do a lot of this stuff. But we thought about creating some sort of paper on that we can at least hand to daycare is a really challenging one, almost always, but something that look before you leap in terms of for a lot of people, a lot of businesses or potential businesses are getting leasing spaces before they've actually done the review of, had anything reviewed there. There's not a feasibility study there. And some of the building types are just not appropriate for what they are trying to do. And I don't know how you go about getting the outreach that would maybe it's to Big Sky Economic Development because they work with, businesses to put together business plans or whatnot and have some sort of a paper or something like that. But I think maybe to Councilmember Owen's point, I think that's where we have the opportunity to do a service to avoid headaches for a lot of entities.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, commercial real estate brokers as well. All right, we'll move on then. Thank you very much, Jessica. Much appreciated to you and your team. Our next item up is Parks and Recreation. Then we'll get into planning. It's 106 in your budget book, is that right? Okay. Or the first item in your planning, or the second item in your planning packet, or in your meeting packet. Mike.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Most of you know me, Mike Pigg, Park Superintendent, and Corey Thompson's here. We're going to walk through the 2024 budget presentation. We started with this picture. We think it's a great shot. That is the Central Park tennis courts that are currently under construction. They did their pour way early in the morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning. They were doing their pour because of all the other concrete businesses were going, all this building was going. That was the only time they could get concrete. Projects moving along smoothly, looking for somewhere around a June 1 opening date. So pretty exciting. Start with this slide. I always like to start with this one. This just shows you the breadth of the project that we have. It's, map of the city and showing all the parks, all the acreage of land that we have, the 43 miles of paved trail and 29 restrooms. Giving you some highlights from 2023. One thing I wanted to highlight was how our programs are actually paying off. And so through, the new IQ irrigation controllers, a proper fertilization program, weed control, training our staff on how to program irrigation controllers, we've actually lowered our water consumption. So that is, the CCF is that's 1,000 cubic feet of water. You see in 2015, we were at 400,000 plus. In 2019, we were down to 179,000. Working with staff, we've actually set a goal to lower that by another 20% this year. So continuing to do good work in saving that. And I think it shows our programs are paying off. I think, the investment that we're making there.
Mike, and I hate to interrupt you, but kind of the obvious question is, what about 20, 21, 22?
Yeah, I get that. So I don't generate these numbers. I got them from Public Works, and they're busy. They didn't have the time. I did ask them to continue that list on out, and they didn't have the time.
What's your guess? Any reason to think there would have been a significant increase or further decrease? Because that's less than 50% of where you started in 2015.
Correct. I believe I think we will see a slight decrease in usage each year, but I don't think we'll see that big jump. 2015, that was a giant jump. And that's just mainly purely staff training, showing them proper way to irrigate. And so then after that, I think we just were gaining them smaller percentage increases. I think we will see the good one this year with the 20% goal, though. They just really are focusing in on it and understanding when it rains, turn the water off. So,
yeah.
And yeah, I know, slight error there. So. Moving on with efficiencies that we've kind of built in or we've been looking for. So the VFD pump stations, that's a variable frequency drive. They actually, there's a cost savings on that or over a normal pump station, they're way more efficient, about 30%. And so over the years, we continue to add VFD pump stations and we're saving on electrical costs. We currently are using our staff for demolition on projects like playgrounds and then also coming back and adding the fall protection. So that's building in some efficiencies instead of having to hire contractors. We do our wholesale tree ordering, so we do all the ordering at one time, trying to get the best deal and save on freight and all of that. And then we'll store them over the year and get better root growth, get healthier trees before we move them out. And then, of course, we also generate our own mulch, so we're able to mulch the trees on a more regular basis, makes healthier trees and, utilizes that byproduct. The cemetery, so this year, one of our big projects that we've had there is installing Plotbox, which is a digital tracking system for graves. So you can now go online and find out where somebody's buried in the cemetery. We're just now starting to roll that out. I tried it today. I wasn't very good at it, so there's a training curve there. But it is online and is going. Going to be really nice for us to be able to, first off, help people find their relatives or whoever they're looking for, but also help us when we are identifying graves to sell and things like that. Also looking at different things that we can do at the cemetery to program it. It is a giant open space, and so we came up with the idea we're going to hold a 5K there this year over Veterans Day. Well, not exactly on Veterans Day, but around that. And we're going to use the proceeds from that to help enhance the maintenance of the veterans' graves. And also, we don't bury very many veterans there, but when they do, it's very expensive. It's a lot more. And so we're going to try and offset some of those costs with this, working through the foundation to help offset some of those costs. Forestry, some of the highlights. Last year we did a large buckthorn removal project down at Riverfront Park. I think as we get that new trail going through there, you'll be able to walk through there and see this buckthorn removal. We are working on another section of that again this year. We'll see how that project goes. The prices are very expensive, and so we're hoping to have some money in the budget to do that. Otherwise, we'll be going to a volunteer program again we just don't get much done with the volunteers. It's a lot smaller, slower process. We also planted over 200 trees this year in the parks. That's not a very good representative sample. It just was a kind of cool picture because we do try to plant them a little bit larger than that.
Did it make it?
Yes, it did actually. So it's still going. So, and then Corey's here to give you some highlights from the Recreation Division.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, to highlight last year, 23, we had to start with the successful season we had with the Miracle League last fall. Kind of got the program kicked off. I'm happy to report our participation numbers have doubled. And last Saturday, we had a great crowd out there, even though the weather was a little cool. So we're excited to keep that going. We are continuing to see an increase in demand and in registration for all of our programs. This year, we saw an 83% increase in our first day registration for summer and overall a 20% increase for the month of April. Currently, we're trying to get our seasonal staff hired. We're seeing about a 60% retention rate for a lot of our lifeguards and our camp counselors, so that's a positive. And also, our staff worked hard with a contract to get our liner replaced out at Rose Pool, which takes me to our next slide, which is kind of highlighting our aquatic operation last summer. We did only have 38 lifeguards. We try to get somewhere up around 50 to guard not only Rose Pool and South Pool, but also our wading pools at Pioneer and at Hawthorne. Right now, I'm happy to report we've got about 40 lifeguards, so things are again looking a little better. And we also have an upcoming Red Cross certification course that first weekend in June before we get ready to open. So we're hopeful to get closer to that 50 mark. Again, over 50,000 people attended Rose and South Pools, thousands more at Pioneer and Hawthorne. Reduced passes, that's an increase. I think last year we had about 290, so we're continuing to see more people applying for the reduced passes for the pools. Our concession continues to be a big hit out at Rose Pool. Again, we've got about 100 kids taking swim lessons in our Learn to Swim program through the American Red Cross. We have 7 weeks of swim lessons, so you can see there. And happy to report we broke a record with 424 dogs at our annual Dog Days of Summer. So you'll recall our council retreat that we spent with you. One of the big outcomes of that was the traveling roadshow, as we called it at that time. And we brought that back to our rec staff, and we have now named that traveling roadshow Rec to You. So we're going to bring recreation to you at Highland and Hawthorne Park as a pilot program this summer. Be free activities. We're going to activate those neighborhood parks, hopefully to advance crime prevention. And as of right now, we've estimated about $5,500 to do that program. It's a free program for the kids that can show up. And a lot of those costs will be in the marketing of the program and also a lot of the equipment and supplies that we'll need to do that. Also, I think it's important to reach out and provide a couple of events that our staff and really, especially with this Arbor Day event on May the 4th. And of course, it was May the 4th. Be with you, as you'll kind of see in the picture there. Our Arbor Day event at Centennial Park, over 400 fifth grade students were there. Educational booths, our staff, the rec staff, the park staff, all pitch in and make this event very successful. Over 50 volunteers, planting a lot of trees, and Councilman Boyette helped plant the official Arbor Day tree, which I think was named Princess Leia. Okay. Also, our staff worked together with MSUB in a very close partnership to provide our Refresh the Rims program. Every fall, we've done it for 10 years now. It's a big rims cleanup that we had over 1,000 volunteers for. So along with scheduling all of the recreation programs comes a lot of the event scheduling that the Recreation Division kind of helps facilitate, at least to get the permits issued, of which we had 145 permits last year. And again, this is kind of calendar year. Picnic shelters continue to be very popular. A lot of folks rent those online for birthday parties, graduation, family reunions, and those types of things. And this is just a list of some of our partnerships that we do in terms of the events we help facilitate. We work very closely with them once their permit is issued. Our staff, our park staff, meet them on site to kind of go over the layouts and facilitate any needs they may have with power or water or whatnot. Turn it back over to Mike. He's going to talk about some of our completed projects.
So just going to give you an overview of some of the completed projects. It's not a complete list, it's just kind of highlighting some of them. So this is Lillis Park Playground that got replaced last spring. Been a very popular playground, drawing a lot of kids there. It's a great. This is Optimus Park Shelter. Finished this shelter early this spring again. The shelter will actually accommodate over 100 people. It's also tied to that indoor shelter there, so kind of get an indoor-outdoor opportunity there. Great structure, beautiful. Working with, we got a grant funding to redo the Heritage Trail through Pioneer Park. Needed to be replaced 10 years ago, so we finally got that done. I think did an excellent job. You can't go there but seeing people walking on that thing, so it's very popular. And then off on the right, that's Ponderosa Park. We're redoing that irrigation system as we speak. Kind of tough to show what that looks like, so I thought this was a good picture showing that trench line and how, you know, it's when they dig it, they're laying that soil right there on a fabric, and so then when they fill that back in, there's not a lot of work to get that cleaned up, and it's a very efficient method. And then there's the brand new VFD pump station, so we're a lot more efficient there and going to save some electricity with that. We worked very closely with Landon's Legacy to finish out phase 1 of Poly Vista. You know, they did the Miracle Field, and then we did the infrastructures in behind that. So that would be the, you know, the parking lot and the water and electrical. And we look forward to working with them further. They're currently raising funds to do a playground, and as you'll see in our budget, there is some funds to help with that phase 2 of that project. Some of the efficiencies that we've kind of tried to build in as we go through. So we work very closely like with Public Works, and so when we have a pump station that needs to be replaced, they'll come in, they'll bring their crane. That's that bottom picture. That's lifting one of our pump stations out of the wet well. We utilize them. They also help with our pump, when we are getting ready in the spring for our rose pool, so they're in there sucking the last of the gross winter water out of that. They've helped us with parking lot repairs and paving projects, so work very closely with them. Kind of in exchange, we do a lot of their trail maintenance in the winter when they can't get to a trail to plow it. You know, we'll get out there and do that for them since that's what we kind of do best. Working very closely with engineering department, they help us manage a lot of our projects. They're actually doing Central Park tennis courts with us, so a great partnership there too. Enjoy working with those guys. few of the projects that we kind of have going on right now. So here's Castle Rock Parks Playground. As you can see, it is coming together. They're currently, I think the wood chips got delivered today for the fall protection, so we're getting ready for that. And then working closely with the group out of the Heights to do a grand opening, so hopefully we'll see that soon. Here's another picture of Central Park's tennis courts. The big crane, our pump truck pumping the concrete in there. Took 2 days to pour that, 45 trucks both days. So a lot of concrete going into that. It's post-tension, should outlast all of us. They say 40-year lifespan on those, so. We got Cottonwood Park's master plan is underway. We met with them just the other day. They are getting ready to go out for the public process. So they're going to do hold their public meetings, get the input as to what people want to see developed there. So exciting to get that rolling forward. And then we got a couple of smaller playgrounds that are active projects right now. Arrowhead Park, which is in the Heights, that's the play pod. We expanded that, made it about twice as big. That equipment is on order and it's on its way. So we'll have that equipment coming in soon. And then the one on the right is Comanche, and that's a CBDG funded project. That one's more than doubled the size of that playground. And then also they did a SEPTED study. And so we're bringing in lights and doing all kinds of things to activate that park. So really exciting projects for both of those parks. So coming up as we roll forward into 24, we got the Castle Rock Park improvements continuing. So that's where we're getting a new restroom and a parking lot there. Paved, actually, that upper parking lot. Gorham, Grandview, Mill Ice irrigation automations. We're actually out to bid with those right now. Bid prices are outrageous, so we'll have to see where that lands. North Park Playground replacement, Highland Park Playground replacement, Poly Vista Playground. You can see we're just trying to activate these parks with new playgrounds. Pretty exciting. And then, of course, Pioneer Park's tennis courts are failing. We've talked about this in the past. I've brought pictures of them. We've actually have 2 of them that are out of play right now, and I'm about to pull another one out, so we'll be down to just 3 courts there. So hopefully this fall we can get in and get those tennis courts replaced with post-tension, and then the school district currently we're actually really affecting their scheduling, and so hopefully we'll get those online for next spring. Here's the approved 24 CIP projects, so just kind of give you an outline of what you're seeing in our budget. Had me worried. So here's the other CBDG funded projects that are ongoing and getting ready to start. So the North Park restroom gets replaced. As you can see, that one kind of has a prison look to it. So that one, we have a new one. It's already on order. We're working with a contractor to get the site work done, and it will look a little less prison-esque. We get a new shelter at North Park, and then we're doing some accessibility upgrades in the North Park Center. So hopefully some HVAC work there. Also, we're going to try adult exercise equipment at North Park. Be our first trial into that. We're hoping that brings a whole nother group into the park, and we can really get that space activated. Zim Center is going to get some upgrades, some ADA issues taken care of there, and then Pioneer Park's restroom gets some upgrades, also push button or non-touch features and stuff like that. Excuse me. So here's some of the departmental goals that we're looking for in 24. So we want to, pursue sustainable funding source. That's number one on our goals still this year is, as PD1 goes away and we're asking for more money to be able to grow these programs and stuff like that, we need to find a sustainable source, working closely with you guys, of course. SEPTED improvements in the parks. We've got a number of them coming on with what CBDG's funding. And then I am not going to Aruba or wherever it was. I get to go to SEPTED training next week. So I have no idea what, language they speak there. Yeah. So that, way we can...
Dutch, actually. That's part of the Dutch Antilles, Mike. Don't you know that?
Well, next week I'll schedule that then. We're going to continue, that way we can continue to support, safe spaces in parks. And you can see that as our projects. We really are focusing on playgrounds and trying to bring adults in to do that. With the Rec to You program, I think, you can see that some of that crime prevention strategies that council's been looking for. Also building some more efficiency savings in like using VFD pump stations, IQ controllers, training staff so that we can do a better job with the resources that we have. So here's our budget proposal. We're 3.4% of the city's overall budget. That is an increase this year of 17%, $2 million. Most of that is taken up with the two big projects, Landon's Legacy, and then, of course, the emergency repair at Pioneer Park. The other portions, they're inflationary adjustments. So we're asking for a pay raise for our seasonal employees, and then also, just the cost of living adjustment for supplies and equipment. So here's the funding sources that we have. As you can see, the majority of our funding currently comes from the general fund. We have the capital portion from PD1, and then, of course, PMDs is a portion of where we're funded 9%. And this year, we are looking to increase the PMDs by 6%. The majority of that, or all of that actually, is in utility cost increase and then material cost increase. A small amount in maintenance time, we're adjusting some of those. They kind of get goofy because some of the PMDs are going to see a very large increase, and it's because they're very small valued, so they get a larger increase. The larger PMDs see a smaller increase, but it's just as utility costs. That's where that number comes in. Here's where the money goes out. So as you can see, parks is obviously the majority of that one. Aquatics is 4%. I thought it was kind of interesting that urban forestry and senior services are the same, 3% of our overall budget. And with that, I thought I'd show you a picture of some of those 425 dogs and see if you have any questions.
Very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mixing it up, we can start down here. Councilmember Purington, do you have anything for us? Or?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Sure. You said something at the very end that kind of threw me off, but what was the slide right before the dog slide? Senior services. I know that's only 3%, but there has been some discussion, maybe it's just Mike and I discussing, but what would that look like if that went to the Alliance?
So, Councilmember Purington, and I think one of the slides highlighted, we've seen a 35% increase in our participation rates for all of our wellness program.
Okay.
We partner very closely with the Alliance right now. We actually are providing programs in their facilities. So our staff is facilitating programs for them, the health and wellness type programs. We don't have any resources or spaces to program in. And again, we're talking yoga classes, drumming classes, strong and fit classes, pinochle, just a wide variety. And I, at some point, would like to show you and bring some of the pictures when I walk out there to either use a restroom or fill. Today there were 15 seniors doing yoga. We have 9. It actually started a drumming little group on Monday afternoons. I think there were 2 or 3. There's over 10 now. So our staff has done a tremendous job of providing opportunities for wellness programs for those 55 and older.
And I understand that it is a popular service. I'm just wondering cost benefits for the city to be running it rather than maybe leasing space to the Alliance, letting them run it. I've never seen the numbers on it, I guess, is what I'm saying, Corey.
Be happy to send you that information. The Alliance asked us to provide those services for them.
Sure.
So they've kind of gotten out of a lot of the wellness programming and allowed our staff to come in and provide those because that's what we specialize in with our senior staff.
Is there grant money out there for seniors?
There are
Because
some,
there used to be.
and we continue to work very closely with the Alliance leadership to pursue some of those.
Okay. So another question that I had, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, was that when I was looking on your 50-cent pay raises, your dollar pay raises, was everything pretty much across the board $14 an hour? So you're increasing those in the different departments, or?
I'll speak first. Not necessarily. A lot of our cashiers, concession workers, I think are at $11 or $12, and then maybe some of our supervisors for some of our summer camps are going to get paid at a higher rate. So a lot of the recreation folks that we hire are high school and college kids. I'll let Mike kind of talk about the seasonal folks that he hires.
So by state law, we have to hire anybody over 18 that we hire. They have to be older, so it makes it a little more challenging for us to recruit seasonals. So our park attendants, which would be our lowest level, we pay those $15 an hour currently. And then we go up from there with the maybe, we'll call them less attractive jobs like restroom closer or restroom opener, where you really have to entice somebody to want to do that. And so those go up, and we get all the way to $18 an hour for a trash truck operator.
And just to follow up on that, one, the Public Works Department, they got rid of some of their seasonal and hired more of FTEs. I don't know if you've looked at that same sort of equation, how that would work for you, if it's truly seasonal. And the other thing, for some of those less attractive jobs as well, that, for community service, the sheriff's labor detail, are those ever options for the Parks Department to use those?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So if you remember right, last year, we actually did trade out 12 seasonal positions for 3 new FTEs. And so we have those people on, and that has made a big difference in our ability to have consistent service. As you saw from the map and to start with, it's such a big area. It's really hard to cover with full-time staff. So we need that 30 to 40 seasonal positions just to be able to spread out over the whole community. And we had 29 bathrooms to try and get open by 6 o'clock every morning. And so there's just no way we could do it with the model that we have set up to where we could do it with full-time staff. And then probably the biggest problem I would have is if we were to transfer that all over and make those all full-time staff, what would I do with them in the winter? I just don't have enough winter type work to keep 30 full-time staff busy. Because, we do a good job keeping the 20 that we have, busy and training and all the things. But if you added another 15, 20 in there, it would really be a challenge.
Maybe Public Works could use them with snow plowing.
So we do share employees with Public Works currently, so when they become strapped and are doing too many overtime hours, we'll swap some of our employees over and have them help with that. So we have done that. Speaking to your sheriff's detail and stuff like that, it's really hard to rely on the sheriff's detail or volunteers even to open restrooms on a consistent, regular basis. Part of that has to do with it's really not a very attractive job. It's not anything I like doing. We do utilize the sheriff's detail, though, for other things. We have a plan, actually, this year. We're going to send them down to Riverfront Park to do some buckthorn. So it's not very much fun going there either, hand pulling those. And so we're going to see if we can't get the sheriff's detail in on that. We have used the drug courts before to help us remove homeless camps. And so when we have time or jobs that are appropriate, we do get that volunteer labor.
Thank you. Councilmember Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. For the audience, I just wanted to say you want a 17% increase of $2.69 million. Can you explain where that money's going to come from so that the normal person can understand it?
Yeah. So the majority of that money is PD1 reserves. So that's where the extra funds that council chose to give to the Poly Vista project, so we can complete that phase 2. And then when Pioneer Park's tennis courts started failing, we needed to get in there. And so we're using those reserves of $1.2 million to fund that project. So those are the 2 largest areas. The rest of it, seasonal wages all come out of the general fund, so that's a general fund item. And then equipment and supplies is all a park maintenance or PD1 funded, and so that's where those funds come from. Yes.
Thank you. Councilor Ripsis?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Mike. And Corey, thank you. On this CIP, the one you had listed up here wasn't the one the council approved, because we deferred Spring Creek and Evergreen Park irrigation so that we could use that $300,000 to put into Poly Vista for the sidewalks and the extra playground money. So I just want to make sure they're out of sync between the one that they approved, and that was at $315,000 there.
That is my error, I'm sorry.
No worries. And just to clarify what Mike was talking about, that $1 million there for Poly Vista Playground is actually an anticipated donation from Landon's Legacy.
Correct.
Right. Just two quick questions. One, we put in a matching funds program last year. Is that included in your budget, or do we need some type of amendment to reauthorize that? Hopefully it was already considered.
So it did not make the budget. It is a successful program. I don't mean to downplay it. We have awarded almost all of that money. A large portion of that's going up on the Skyline Trail for some shelter structures. And also we matched a grant for a trail project in Rose Park. We had to go through some reductions in our budget, and that was one of the items that we chose to reduce. Not saying it wasn't a good program, and I like it to be funded, so yes.
Thank you. And finally, Mayor, one more. We're anticipating some type of ballot measure this fall. Do you have funds allocated to help educate people on what it is that we're looking to do? There's going to be a lot of disinformation or misinformation out there related to whatever it is we choose to propose. And I think the city, obviously can't advocate for things, you as staff, but we probably will need to have a very concerted education effort there. So have we included those kind of ideas in the budget?
Councilmember Rupsis, I don't believe we did. And so I think that's a miss on my part between my recommended budget and what I would suggest we consider amending for the adopted budget. And as you said, they can only be education dollars, they can't be promotion dollars, but you are correct. When we've done the previous two public safety levies, we did have, and I think it's wise and needed to have some. It's tens of thousands. It's not a six-figure number, but I think we do need to bring to you a number to consider amending the proposed budget for the adopted budget to have that component covered.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I have two questions. First is, I know that the aquatics facility study's in the CIP, but I just want to make sure that it's part of the budget for this year so that we get that done. I see Corey's nodding his head. Okay, awesome. Related to that, how long is that going to take, and when will we actually have that information in hand?
Councilmember Shaw, we'll get started right away in July and try to put that together. We'll work with our new project manager to start the RFP process and try to get that moving as quickly as we can so that information can be available and help us make decisions.
Perfect. And then my next question is, and this is going to be a lot of if. As Councilmember Rupta said, we are contemplating coming to the public for some kind of an ask this year. If that ask includes North Park, the community center there, and Zimmerman Center, would you pull out some of the improvements that you have? Because I noticed you have a couple of upgrades there. I don't know what the timeline is in terms of if those buildings are going to fall apart without that, but I'm just wondering, we don't want to be spending money, obviously, on something that if something is approved by the voters and we end up needing to replace it, that we would have just, wasted money, basically. So can you talk about that a little bit?
I sure can, and thanks for the question. So some of the upgrade is actually an efficiency sort of thing. The HVAC system in North Park is not adequate. It doesn't heat things very well in the winter, and it definitely doesn't keep them chilly in the summer. So I think that's just an efficiency savings, and we have to do that just to make the building usable. The other upgrades that we're doing there are ADA accessibility issues. And even though it's going to be a short run for that building, hopefully, that we would only be in the 2 to 3 year range. I still believe that those are important upgrades just for the accessibility, just for that short period of time.
Okay.
Not large expenses, but at the same time, I don't want to waste money, but I think it's worth it, money we're spent.
Okay. Well, yeah, we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay,
We're under tens, yes.
perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gulick?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Thank you, Mike and Cory. We do get questions from public sometimes about use of pesticides or herbicides. And could you just talk about what the program is in terms of, been getting some good results with and being able to reduce the amount of water usage? Are there ways that we can, how would you characterize our current use of herbicides and pesticides, and are there opportunities for reducing that too?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So when we first started the program, you may have remembered what the parks looked like. And Mr. Mayor is always really good at pointing out that the parks used to be yellow this time of year. We brought in a spray program. We had to be very aggressive the first few years, and we did get the dandelions under control. We've worked through a clover issue, plantain issue. So currently, I wouldn't say our parks are weed-free. We're never going to go to a 100% weed-free park. But I do believe that by controlling the weeds and fertilizing properly, we've actually saved a lot of water. And also, I think they're safer because, even a park like Castle Rock Park used to just become basically just a weed mat. And so then, it's a slip hazard, it's a trip hazard, and they're just not safe. So now we've got a pretty good handle on our weed problem. And so like even this spring, my guy was out spraying for dandelions, but he was using a small hand sprayer because we don't have these large applications that we're having to make like we did. So the big boom sprayer isn't out there blanketing the whole park with 2,4-D. We're actually down to a small hand sprayer at this point in time, just kind of touching up edges. We always spray at the lowest rate that is legally sprayable that will actually kill the weed. So the last thing we want to do is go out there with too low of a rate and then have the weed survive through that. So we always spray at the lowest rate that is allowable by the label. And then to talk a little bit about staff training, currently all of my 17 full-time staff are licensed applicators. Even though not all of them apply, we've encouraged all of them to become licensed applicators, and some of them are certified applicators. And then we always, anybody who sprays in the parks that's not one of them, we apply and we get them a license underneath one of those applicators. So everybody has a license and goes through a training program to become at least trained on how to do it, so they're not just out there. And then before I allow anybody to go spray a product, they have to read the label that applies to that portion that they're applying to. So if they're going to apply Roundup on a turf grass area, they got to read the Roundup label for that and understand what they're doing and the effects of that chemical. So, and then of course PPE comes into that, personal protection equipment. We always mandatory that they use the minimum. So whatever the law says, they have to use that. And I always encourage them to do what they feel is safer. So if they, if it says that they don't have to wear gloves, I always encourage them to wear rubber gloves. If it says that they don't have to wear a respirator, I always encourage them to do that. We always wear protective equipment that whatever is required, they have to wear that. And I encourage them to go above and beyond.
Councilmember Gulick?
Quick follow-up also then, the Public Works is looking to generate really up their game with a composting program, and there'll be significant quantities in a year or two, I guess. Any thoughts on how that might be integrated into your work at the parks?
Yeah, actually, we're really excited about the project that they have going. We currently purchase compost from a local distributor to apply to our Amon Park. That's what we top dress with there. We found that it's helped immensely with the turf growth there. So we're excited that there's going to be a city-produced product, and we can utilize that. We actually have our own composting project too. So we take all our waste that isn't used in mulching of trees and stuff like that, and we store it down at Wilson Park. And we currently are already mulching our beds with our own produced mulch. So we're excited that there'll be another source.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Neese?
No comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Owen?
No questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I just wanted to ask, what about our are wild parks, are parks that are not manicured grass. How are they developing, and what's the future for those parks that are not manicured grass? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. We do have a very active natural lands parks program, and I hope to bring to this body a policy so that they can actually say, yes, that is our natural lands policy. We haven't put one of those together in the past, and so I hope to have that presented to you so that we can see what gets declared as a natural lands and how do we plan on maintaining those. I think they're doing excellent. If you look at like, Desk Grove Strip, which is a park. Some people don't like the way it looks, but it looks like a natural grasslands out there. When you're walking that trail, you think you're walking through a natural grassland area. And to tell you the truth, the school there, I think it's Meadowlark Elementary, they love it. They bring field trips out there. They're out there looking for insects and snakes. And I just had a teacher just the other day tell me that that's where they were going to do their field day this year, is right there in that park. So I think the program's working, and it saves the city money too, because we're not out there trying to mow that down, treat the weeds and stuff like that. It just kind of takes care of itself. You know, once we got a handle on the weed growth in there, we don't spray those areas. They just kind of go and take care of themselves. Great project.
Thank you. Mike, just a comment and a question. The comment is just put in my pitch for that match program and finding those dollars. Just a couple days ago, I had somebody, very capable citizen, who would like to work on the improvements of the Boot Hill Cemetery area and raise money for that. But I talked to him about the city's match program. That was very important to him to incentivize those efforts. So I think that's a good example of, even if we have to cut something else, the match program produces $2 worth of benefit for every $1 of tax dollars. So that's a really good deal for our citizens. On the question comment, I guess, on the Rec to You program, love the logo, love the name. The projected cost is only $5,500. I know that was something you were trying to squeeze out of the FY23 budget because it was popped on you. But is that enough? And do you want to solicit, now that hundreds of thousands of people are watching you on television, for additional contributions for that? What would you use it for if you had the money?
Yeah, it would allow us to, thanks for the question, Mayor. Again, our staff is really excited for it. It would allow us to expand the program. So right now, it's just a pilot program, 2 locations. We do plan to bring this forward. It's kind of part of our funding. But I think if that doesn't happen, I think we'll bring it to this body for next fiscal year. But I think additional dollars would increase our opportunity to do more days and potentially longer stays at those parks.
And Corey, just for anybody who might be listening, could you just give the elevator speech for what the Rec to You program will be?
Yeah, so it's bringing our recreation staff, equipment, supplies to these parks, and basically setting up a mobile recreation program that'll be free for anybody to attend. We picked a couple parks that, number one, kind of have a little bit of a shelter. So if we do get some bad weather, we do have at least a cover to get under. And both actually have a water amenity, a spray ground and a wading pool. So there will be, well, we hope, some kids there that we'll be able to attract to this program. Again, our staff is working on ways to advertise and market this program because it didn't make our activity guide. It was kind of added in late at the council retreat. So again, we see opportunity here. Staffing was a big concern. Things are looking better in that regard. So we feel like the potential to expand it beyond what we've kind of at least identified in this slide definitely exists. So again, almost half that $5,500 is going to be used for advertising and supplies. A lot of those supplies will be able to be reused. And some of the advertising that we're thinking about are the large flags or yard signs so that people know we're in that park. They know it's Parks and Rec, and we need to make sure people understand it's a free opportunity to participate. So.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. Councilmember Trickey?
You literally stole my thunder. I think it's a great program. I'm very excited to see how that works out.
Okay, very good. Council, that's, I guess, our questions. Do we have any public comment? Oh, I apologize. Councilmember Tidswell.
I'm good, Mayor. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? No one's with us online. No one's coming to the podium, so we'll close the public comment period on the Parks and Rec element. And we'll continue on with plating, code enforcement, and community development.
All right, well, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you for the opportunity to present the Planning and Community Services Department fiscal '24 budget. Just wanted to note that you'll see as we go through the presentation that a lot of the elements of the presentation match our Planning and Community Services Department budget overview in your budget book, including some of the challenges that I'm going to talk about later on in the presentation. So certainly that narrative and that information as we come out of tonight, if you're looking back at things, should hopefully match up pretty well with what you're going to hear, and if there's questions later on regarding the high points. I also wanted to mention that this slide deck is going to be slightly different than what you received end of last week, because we had the opportunity to present this budget to the Council Budget Committee last week, and a suggestion or recommendation was made to include some information, more information about the legislative session and kind of where that's at. So you'll see added a slide in here regarding that specifically. So that's a little bit of a change from what you've got, and we can certainly send out this updated one after the presentation this evening. So first, I want to introduce the excellent management team that I have in the department. I've got Monica Plecker, our Planning Division Manager here, who you've seen before, as well as Tina Hoger, our Code Enforcement Manager, also who's been up at the podium multiple times in the last year as we've worked through different code enforcement and public safety items. Brenda Beckett, our Community Development Manager, wasn't able to be here tonight. She's actually out of town at a funeral, so but she also is part of our division team here. So I just wanted to call out them. And we have 25 staff total in the department across those three divisions. Just looking at some high points of all the different things that our divisions do, and we cover a really wide breadth of services and activities for the city, and in planning's case, it's also county, so we do city and county planning out of the planning division. We are, as you all are well aware, we are a metropolitan planning organization for transportation planning, and that's a federally funded designation and program, and so that's something we do for the city of Billings and the urbanized area in Yellowstone County, and that's housed out of our planning division. Our public safety mill levy implementation with code enforcement is going very well, and in fact, we're fully implemented in terms of the staffing and the resources that were put forward to that, and moving along with a lot of work in that area. And then we have our, in community development, just as a highlight, our VISTA program there is nationally recognized, the Billings Metro VISTA project, and continues to be extremely successful. We've cited, I think, about enough VISTA, or cited in 50 different nonprofit organizations in the community with VISTA members since 2009 when that program was launched. There's two things that aren't on this slide or called out, and that's work that I do specifically with the 3 urban renewal districts in the community, the South Billings, East Billings, and downtown districts. And then also I work with our department receptionist to provide support to the 8 neighborhood task forces. The urban renewal district work does take up a fair amount of my time working with those 3 districts, both on different activities and things going on within those districts, the policies and consistencies of those applications, then also obviously when we bring things to you for recommendations on those projects. And then the task force support's a little bit of it's sort of a side element, and I guess it's a little less defined, even though I know it's very important to the council in terms of that relationship between the city and the task forces, but that is something that we also help out and support them throughout the year. Just a few statistics from calendar 22, and again, this is similar to building. We follow the calendar for our reporting, and I'll just, we've had a really busy and productive year in our department. We had a lot of development activity. That was very strong. Code enforcement officers were out working the neighborhoods throughout the year. And the city council also directed community development block grant, CV, COVID funds to support parks projects, which you heard about just a few minutes ago. So I won't go into much detail there. You guys even saw pictures of Comanche Park, Pioneer Park, and several of the parks that we affected. I wanted to call out our master site plan review information here. We did 24 master site plan reviews in 2022, and those are reviews that we do for projects where you have 2 or more buildings on a property that are sharing common facilities. And so they can be residential, like a multifamily, apartment complex type project, or they can be a commercial project. But they specifically go through an advanced review to look at the site, and it's coordinated with building and engineering, so that then if I'm building multiple buildings, I can come in, and then from then on, when I'm doing each permitting, we go back to that master site plan, so you're not redoing it every time. But we did 24 of those, and 12 were commercial and 12 were residential, which is significant. That means, we had a lot of commercial activity. As Jessica said, we've seen that continue to be strong in residential in that area as well. And then lastly, just we've gone up 75% in our Facebook followers. So we're very excited about that. For us, that's a big deal. We were down at like 1,000, and then we just, and I'll attribute it very much so to both some of the project-specific activities that we're doing. Our active transportation planner, Elise Manat, with the Mobilize the Magic City and the Safe Routes to School, and those things, we've really pushed those out and really activated and engaged the community. And then working with the city's public information officer, Victoria Hill, with code enforcement and some of our planning work, we've really been able to ramp that up. So that's really great, and we see a lot more engagement now through that. We also stream our meetings to Facebook Live, and so obviously we also get people who are checking it out from that aspect as well. I'm not going to go through all these. These are the council and department goals and how they mesh together, and these are also in our overview. But it's really important to point out that we're listening, we're watching, we're participating in your goal and strategy development every year, and then we're incorporating those and carrying those out within our department goals as well. So, we're now building the Inner Belt Loop and the Skyline Trail that we worked as a partner on to get the funding for through the build grant. We've implemented our code enforcement, public safety, mill levy resources. We've got regulations in place for massage and marijuana businesses that are actively being applied. And we're participating currently in, as an example, in the council's housing strategy implementation effort with Homefront that's leading that as well. And then lastly, we just secured, which you saw in the city administrator report last week, a community development state block grant funds to do two neighborhood plans, basically to do the West End plan with those funds, and then be able to leverage other funds to do the Heights neighborhood plan as well. So just wanted to point that out. There's a lot going on. You have a lot of priorities and goals, and we're working on a lot of those, and things are getting done and also ongoing. There is a lot more to do, and we have a couple of big projects or efforts that I'm gonna talk to you about tonight. I've put little dollar signs on them up here on the goal sheet, but basically the area planning that we need to look at regarding the Inner Belt Loop corridor and the North Bypass area in terms of really drilling down into the analysis of that area from an economic standpoint, the build out, what kind of demand is there for different types of development, and then helping collect data there that can be fed to Public Works to figure out some details of the infrastructure side of that. So that's important. I'll talk about that a little more in a few minutes. And then also comprehensive planning, which I'll talk about regarding legislative changes, but also needs there that we have to address. And then lastly, which isn't, it's called out at the top goal on the improved safety, but the SEPTED efforts, we're talking about, we're going to be going to that training next week. I'm going, and several of the planning and code enforcement staff, but we're not sure what's going to come out of that from the council standpoint of new policy, new regulatory efforts. And so that is also potentially going to be a resource demand that we're going to have to figure out depending on where that goes in terms of what the expectations are for what we do with that in the future. So getting into the numbers here for a minute. This is looking at our department revenue proposed for fiscal 24 at almost 3 million. It can't see it here, but this actually includes down at the bottom, but you can see the orange general fund number up there. That's the code enforcement funding. Code enforcement's entirely general fund funded, so that I've pulled that into the big picture here so you can see the whole thing, but that's where that is coming from. We continue to see substantial revenues because of the CDBG funds that we've got, like the home ARP and some of those allocations that are in place that we're going to be allocating. And we've been working through like the other CDBG CV funds in the past. And then also we're fully implementing now with our code enforcement public safety resources for this year across that. But there is a proposal to reduce our abatement fund in code enforcement to help with balancing the general fund. But we're working with and have had discussions with city administration and finance, and we discussed it actually at the council budget committee as well, a strategy to deal with that so we don't slow down abatements that we're trying to get completed as we go into the next fiscal year. We've already done 11 this year, and so we're still in fiscal 23, so we're anticipating a lot of activity in that area next year. And then just a couple of highlights on this chart. That $79,750, that's other grants and transfers. That is actually general funds payment for rent for community development, which has been ongoing for several years, but it's gone up some. We've got included in there the move to the new city hall and some of those costs. So that is what that number is, just to understand. And then that 650 in miscellaneous is actually, those are both existing carryover and anticipated loan repayments in community development for first-time homebuyer loans that are being paid back, and we're continuing to see that going fairly steadily. So some of that's carryover and some of that's anticipated what we think will happen in the new fiscal year. And that's what we call then program income, because then we can use that again for support in CDBG programs as well. But we can't always tell how quickly it's going to get returned. No, thanks. So just to look at revenue by division, really want to call out here, you'll see that for community development and planning, federal grant funding is a big portion of both of those budgets. Obviously, community development is that bulk of that is HUD funded through those programs, and then planning is specifically that transportation planning for the MPO that comes in. And the other really critical piece in planning there is that $508,000 you see at the bottom, property tax. That's the countywide planning levy, which we then use substantially to leverage against that federal transportation program funds, because you have to match those funds at different percentages depending on what you're doing. So that's significant, and that levy is important. It's really important to be able to do that, as well as some of the other revenue that we have. But that's sort of our big county levy fund that we can access. That levy is currently 1.35 annually countywide for planning, and it's been that way for many, many, many years. I know in terms of future discussions about helping and providing additional sort of steady, consistent planning funds, that is an area that we could take a look at in that area. And then I was going to mention, you see that 15,000 in community development. That's actually that VISTA funds that we get from the VISTA host sites. They contribute that to us. It's not HUD money, it's not city money, it's right from them, and that's where, and we've had some questions on this in the past, we use that really to actually buy supplies and things for the Vistas, because we can go out to the store or whatever and get something with that money, because it's specifically to support them. So that's where, it's a small number, but I just wanted to, when you see this big stack, that's what that is being shown there too. Going over to expenditures, also again, code enforcement, general fund expenses in here, so the 1,000,000.08, it's exactly both sides of that, that's included in this. And we're really, what we do is deliver services with people, and we're supported by, a well-run operation. So that's what we have. We're not capital, we have some trucks and some things like that, but that's it. It's really the operations and support, and then the personnel to get the things done. The transfer out that you see of that 25 that's sticking out there is actually the equipment replacement contributions for code enforcement and planning into that program. So that's why it's just sort of, it sits there, but that's to fund future vehicle replacements for those two programs. Community development does not participate in that because of the way, again, the HUD funding is. So if they're going to purchase a vehicle, they have to do it through separate process. just a quick look at our expenditures and revenues over the last 10 years. You can see ups and downs, but they've tracked pretty closely together. The larger increases in the last few years is tied a lot to those HUD funds that came in and were contributed to. And we did actually also, for last year, we had the Skyline Trail partly was budgeted in our account, even though it was being built through Public Works. So there's been some fluctuations, but we're in a really solid spot right now with those revenues where they are and with our expenses. We're spending a little in the planning reserve, which is not uncommon, especially as we balance our federal transportation planning program, and it walks through the federal fiscal year, and then we're going through the city fiscal year, but we're well over the 13% minimum requirement that the council has in place. And we are planning to, as I said earlier, to use some of that fund to match for the neighborhood planning grant that we just received. So, get into the legislative session highlights. And this is, I'm not going to read through all these bills or anything like that, but I wanted to kind of give an overview. A lot happened in this legislative session in land use. I want to just touch really briefly on, before I get into the land use pieces here, because that's what's on the slide. And you did hear from Representative Yakowicz actually last night. I saw him on the TV. That his bill to increase the municipal court collections limit from $9,500 to $25,000 did pass, was signed by the governor, and that's going to be a great improvement for us as we do abatements. We go through the municipal court process for abatements for code enforcement, being able to get up at least to that $25,000 mark. So that was great. We weren't even really thinking about that going into the session, and then all the things kind of fit together. Worked with city administration, and then obviously with you all and with him, and that went forward. So I wanted to call that out because that's not on this slide, because this is really just trying to focus on all the land use elements. We kind of put this in three categories. So we have subdivision, bills that affected subdivision, and that can be all types of the elements of subdivision review and regulation and process. Same with zoning. And then we have the large Montana Platting Act, basically Senate Bill 382, that actually incorporates both of those elements and others into a whole kind of new process of how to do our land use planning efforts and growth policy efforts in the state. And so what you're seeing is sort of breaking that out, but then also looking at that Senate Bill 382 specifically. That bill passed, and I think we're waiting for the governor to sign it, so we expect that to happen fairly soon, but has been a long time coming. And I've talked to the legislative committee about this at several meetings throughout the legislative session, but it makes some real wholesale and really significant changes to the land use regulations in the state and the processes. And I think to the extent that a lot of it is good improvements and things that we need to do. The Platting Act, and that has been in place for decades and has had a lot of challenges. The legislature's been trying to fix it one bill at a time, as you can see by those other lists in past and this session. And so it really has been an opportunity to get all these stakeholders together and put something in place that really can move us forward. It has a very robust public participation effort at the front end of this process now. And so when you're doing your growth policy, you're looking at how you're engaging the public in that effort. You're engaging the public regarding future land use mapping. You're bringing in housing data and using that to inform how you put together your zoning. And are you accommodating the number of housing units that that you've analyzed, that you assess that your community needs? So there's a lot of pieces to that 382 that are really good and important, but also are different than what pieces of it that are different than what we've done in the past. So we, as the population of Billings and as a first-class city, have to implement this, and we have to implement it within 3 years because our growth policy has to be updated as well. And so it ties in with that. It's either a 3-year or a 5-year range. And so we've got to move that forward. So we are proposing, and we talked to the budget committee about this, we're going to need resources that's not in our current budget to get that done and to start it in 2024 if we're going to complete it within the less than 3 years because we have to move that. And that's a consultant effort tied with staff. And so we've got an estimate for that of $200,000 to start in 24, but certainly carry into probably 2 fiscal years to complete that. The other bills, and I don't want to get too further into the weeds on this tonight, but some of them depend on or are tied into 382. So some of them have effective immediately dates, and some of them have October dates, and some of them have January dates. But we're gonna have to sort of balance it with, if we're starting to implement and work through 382, which ones of those other bills do we fully change our regulations to address? And which ones do we say, you know what, we know we have to follow them because the effective date was whatever it was, but when we do 382, we're gonna make some of those decisions ourselves, which we're allowed to do. So we're not going to change the regs once and then change them again. We're gonna deal with them in 382. So we have to look at that balancing act, and that's why we know there's gonna be staff and time to do some of that, but it's really gonna be partly how we launch 382 to figure out which of those we really need to fully amend and which ones we can incorporate into that process. We also work for the county in the planning, and so there are certainly bills here that are gonna have to be changed at the county permanently. The county, we started 382 at the session with counties included, and they got to opt out partway through. That was amended, and we expect, haven't confirmed this, but we expect our county potentially to opt out, so we will have two separate, we'll have the current regs at the county and we'll have the new regs in the city. And so some of those other bills will have to be put in place for the county to apply. So that's a lot of information, but I want to hit on that because the resource need is certainly there for us to figure out moving that 382 forward. And the public participation is going to be really important at the front end because that legislation and the law now is set up to engage and work with your community and your public at the front end so that when processes like a subdivision comes forward at the back end, there's not, every single subdivision, public hearing, knockdown, drag out in some cases, although we don't have a lot of those here, I'll say, other communities do. A lot of those go through fairly well, but the idea is to get everybody to weigh in and participate so that, yep, this is the plan, this is the land use map, now we're going and we're making those decisions that way. So I'll hit challenges. This is my last slide. And this fits right back into some of what I just talked about. So on the planning side, we have sort of two areas there. The comprehensive planning, which is the second item there, is 382, so I won't go through all that again. The long-range planning piece is those area plans, doing that analysis I talked about regarding the Inner Belt Loop corridor, the North Bypass area, and doing some funds, one-time funds to be able to analyze those and then get something in place, both from a land use but also a infrastructure side to put that together. We're estimating that to do those two at $100,000 as well. So that's the other piece of that recommendation. And then, and this is on both community development and planning, internal service charges. We are seeing some real challenges there. I don't want to, those other items are really important. We're working through these, but our IT charges have significantly increased over the last few years. This year was a little bit better, but we actually spent a lot of time working with IT to make some changes and work through some issues that we didn't even know we had mechanically in the system. So we made some changes. It helped a little. We've got more to do there. And we're working with finance and administration and IT to look at that. As an example, there's some unallocated, for GIS, there's unallocated charges that get distributed across multiple departments at a percentage that have been in place for, we discovered, about 9 or 10 years, and we didn't know actually how that was working, and it's a big percent, it's 17% in planning, so we've got to revisit that as sort of collectively. So there's some things there we're going to be doing this year so that when fiscal 25, hopefully we'll have some good change there. And then lastly, on community development, the other piece is that long-term, what I'm calling long-term service agility, and that's this issue of community development is funded entirely except for rent with the HUD programs. And so when we had some really good discussion here in April about both affordable housing development and how we support that, and also like what else can we do as a city to influence that or influence other similar issues. And our challenge there is that our staff is very tied to those HUD programs for how they're funded. And so it's not that I can't send a community development staff person like to the housing strategy forum we had last week, but to really have somebody devote a significant amount of time to work on something like that, we don't have a good way to do that because they're supposed to be billing, like HUD is who we're answering to pay their salary. So we're really wrestling with that. And I don't have a perfect plan for you tonight or an exact number, but I wanted to share that. It's in the narrative that we've got to work through that because we're running into that. I hear the community and I hear you saying, gosh, what else can we do? How else can we participate and be part of this and engage? And we're kind of in a tough spot there because we're tied to those funding sources. So with that, we'll be happy to answer questions. And go from there. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Shall we start with Councilmember Shaw?
Sure, I don't have any questions, great presentation, but I did want to just take this opportunity to give Tina Hoger 2 thumbs up. The difference that I feel like I've seen in code enforcement's response has been tremendously helpful, and I think is really impacting our citizens. They feel like they're getting answers quickly, things are getting addressed. So I feel like it is working as everyone hoped, in my view. And so I just really appreciate the work and leadership that you've put into that.
Thank you. And it's a good reminder, we do have Tina, code enforcement, and Monica, also from planning, if people have questions for them as well. So, Councilmember Gulick?
Yeah, I guess jumping on that point, I would say it used to be that you know, if people in the neighborhoods are having problems, they would go to the council member, and then I would try to track down staff, and now they're going straight to staff because staff have been really so responsive, and it's made it, I can focus on policy issues instead of, yes, right. So that is appreciated. Interested to hear, I have a few questions. Interested to hear staff thoughts on how we do go about funding. What are some of our options to make sure that we can properly resource planning to implement things from Senate Bill 382 and other things. I am excited about a robust growth policy process. It's going to take some work to get that going. So I'm interested in hearing from administration and the department in terms of ideas. Secondly, this is a code enforcement kind of question. I understand that there are some ordinance revisions that are in the works. Just anything to report out on that in terms of timing, or is that are there the resources to move those forward?
Yeah, so Councilmember Gulick, I'll start with that one, I guess, first, and then, because I think Chris may be chiming in here too on the other item. So yes, we actually have, Tina and her staff went through several parts of our the ordinances that we found some challenges with, the nuisance ordinance, one of those, and a couple of other areas, graffiti, that section of the code needs some major work. So they did that. We reviewed that, and then we had a meeting with city legal because we need them to do a review and come back with some ideas, which they had some. Gina Dahl, the city attorney, had some great ideas even about how to kind of clean up the sections that we hadn't even thought of. So we're working actively to bring that forward to you. I'm hoping later this summer. I mean, working with her team and availability and stuff. But yeah, that is going forward, and we have, I would say, is it 4 areas? I think we have about 4 areas that we're going to bring to have you help us hopefully make some changes.
Councilmember Gulick, Mayor and Council, pieces I would add. So full big picture, longer term, I think the city needs to think very seriously about having a dedicated long-range planner position. That doesn't have to happen this year, but I think we're a city of 120,000. We're growing at a pace, and post-COVID, the rush to Montana is going to continue to put pressure on our community for long-range planning. And so how to fund that? You've got a couple mechanisms. I'm not going to say we're the only one because I've not surveyed them, but once upon a time, many communities levied 2 mills for planning services. A whole bunch of our revenue comes in through fees for service. And that's wonderful, right? Those individuals are putting pressure on the system. They're making applications, and so the general taxpayer shouldn't be covering the cost, and generally they're not. The problem is we've not, in addition to that, kept enough resources to have planners and planning processes like our neighborhood plans, right? Probably every neighborhood with a neighborhood plan in Billings wishes that their neighborhood plan were up to date. And so that stress, as there's redevelopment taking place or development on the edges of town taking place, is there's further conflict or contention there around the fact that their neighborhood plans are so out of date. And a long-range dedicated planner could help us keep those much more on track. In addition, with the legislative changes that have come, and I think overall they are good, so I want to be careful not to like point the finger. The legislature did this to us as an unfunded mandate. I don't think that's the proper way to look at it, because it is our community and we're responsible for planning it. So whether it's working with the county and ultimately having 2 mills, I think right now we're at about 1.135, whether that would ever be something that we would take to the voters countywide to dedicate towards planning. I think that's a good long-range consideration. In the short term, we do find ourselves in this position where, because of our taxable value increase and our mill levy cap and fitting outside of the legislative process, because we're one of those 2 cities in Montana with the hard mill levy cap, you do have a situation this year where you can use some of that capacity to also invest in land use planning. And I think we have to do that. I think between, again, this is another one of those, between the city manager, city minister's recommended budget and the final budget, now that with the legislature's all done, we know what's on our plate. You need to seriously debate from a policy perspective whether you agree that you want to put more resources into the land use planning process for not just application activity, which we're seeing an increase of, but actual focus on the growth policy update and the neighborhood plan updates, which we've gotten some grant dollars to help us with as well. So.
Okay. Councilor Gulick?
One more question. You mentioned that planning staff, I think this is planning staff, that with the task forces, neighborhood task forces, you help support. I've noted, and the neighborhood task forces that I've attended, they can be highly effective, or they can be fairly ineffective. And a lot of it just happens to be, who's chairing it, the meetings, and there's a skill of how to run a good meeting, an effective meeting, have an agenda, keep things moving forward. I see, the attendance at meetings really trail off if there's people going off in different tangents, and it goes on forever, like my questions probably. But I don't know if there's some way for us to provide just some base level training for the chairs, and just how do you run an effective meeting? I think that could be really leverage these great volunteer work that happens in our community. But that would be something I'd recommend. I know of some organizations that have like fact sheets on how to run a meeting, and it's just like a half-hour training can make a big difference. So.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that a little bit, Councilmember Gulick and Mayor and Council. Yeah, we right now, we do quarterly meetings with the task force leadership, all the leadership of the task forces. So we invite them quarterly. In fact, we're meeting this Thursday at our current timing. We actually have tried to do a couple things, and I like your good question, and your point here is we invited them. We had a few of them attend the board and commission training that we did when Dan Clark was here from the local government center. And then we actually have I've been doing with them a couple of sessions on these quarterlies about how to run meetings and a little more about that. And we've actually also had them share with each other a little more about who's having a successful meeting, how are they doing outreach, who's not. So we're trying to do that, but I certainly, the idea of others or other ideas that we could bring to that would be great. And then we also, we're starting this actually Thursday, having the other city departments come in and just talk about what they do, who they are, contacts, kind of helping to give them that information. A lot of what we do, you budget $12,000 a year for task force support, and we try to make sure it gets spent legally and properly through the process by getting inquiries from them and saying, yep, you can do this, no, you can't do that with this money, and then we work through it with them. A lot of it, like the Easter egg hunt that just happened in South Park, we helped them with their park permitting and some of their insurance that they had to get for that. We were able to use some of the funds to help with that. So those are the kind of things we do. We help them with events if they're having a big, like some of them have once a year a neighborhood meeting where they invite, try and kind of launch themselves every year. And so we help with some of that. So that's what we've been doing with that money that you allocate. But it is challenging because that's our tie to them. We don't tell them what to do. We don't run their, and there's a lot of that. I think I get inquiries where someone wants me to call somebody up and say, stop doing this or doing that. And it's like, well, they're independent. We're not, we have this money, but we're not like telling them how to run. So there's some interesting dynamics there. It's, so it's working relatively kind of in that informal way. But certainly, yeah, more training, I would be open. If there was organizations that we could even have come talk to them, that would be great. So I like that idea.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Councilmember Neese. Just a reminder, Council, just to alert everybody where we're at time-wise. 7:25. We normally want to take a break in 5 minutes. We don't want to do that. We don't want to break up this. We want to finish this. Our T-bid guests have been very patient there, but we're not going to get to you before we take a break. But if we move quickly, short questions, short answers, and hopefully just one question, and because we've still got 9 of us. So we're going to go beyond 7:30, but that's fine. Hopefully not too far. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to say thank you for Tina and her department for what they've done throughout the city. And Tina, I do have a question about the budget for you. I just want to clarify some things, if you wouldn't mind. The estimated budget is $626,000. You're going to be proposing $827,000. So it's quite a bit. Your proposed last year was 808. So you're pretty short this year. So where's the shortage come from? And then what are you trying to fill in the budget?
Are you asking me why my budget decreased?
No, I'm asking, well, you had budgeted, no,
That
your
would be an Andy
budget, your budget increased, but you didn't make your budget. Were you short-staffed, or what was the reason you didn't make your budget this year? I mean, I'm glad.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Yeah, Councilmember Neese, you're looking at fiscal 23 estimate, 662?
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, so that's actually not complete. We're not done with fiscal 23. So
Okay, so you're not estimating that what it's going to end, that's just where you're at. That's a year-to-date number, not a year estimated at the end of the year. Okay, thank you. Then I won't ask that question, but Tina, I do want to ask a question about your budget. Part of the budget is there any plans to make the reporting of graffiti easier? And take a picture, GSI app, and it shows up on GSI somewhere so you guys can see it.
I'm hoping that will come with the new software that was purchased.
Okay.
That is part of that, because what we do have in our budget for next year is so the officers can do tablet work from the field and having that report directly to their tablets so that they can go out and do what they need to do. But I think that's going to be part of the new software. I am currently working, I just had GIS create a map internally for me that is now filled with data about graffiti, nuisance properties, and our abatements. And it's basically the Dirty Dozen on steroids, if you will. So you'll be, eventually I would like to be able to give all of you access to that so that you can see in real time what we're dealing with, where it's happening. You'll also be able to click immediately to a before and after picture, so you will be up to date on everything we're doing.
Great. So how goes the war against graffiti?
Well, we have some non-cooperative property owners. Part of the ordinance revamp was the graffiti ordinance. There was some stuff in there that we discussed with legal about changing and updating and making better and making easier for us to enforce. So currently Todd has about 65 open cases. People are responsive, they'll get to it. But the biggest thing for me personally is the city needs to be setting that example. So our properties need to be taken care of before I feel good about, going after a private property owner. So that's part of what I'm working on right now.
Thank you, because I noticed that myself. I see a lot of city things tagged, and they are tagged quite a while. So is there anything in our budget that can help you accomplish that and get this done?
You know, the departments that are responsible for some of those areas are just as probably strapped as the others. So I'm going to try and supplement it from my department to maybe get us to a place to where we're clean and then turn it back over. So I'm going to try and use some sheriff's labor detail, use some other options to help get us to a place where our stuff is taken care of so that we're setting that example.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Owen? No, okay, thank you. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And as I'm watching the T-bid people sit very quietly, I'll pass and thank you for the good presentation.
Thank you. Wyeth, cost of service study, on the list of council proposals, it's listed as develop cost of service tool to inform development decisions. I actually think that that's inaccurate of what we came up with last time because we realized that was too optimistic. We downgraded it to just investigate, or something like this is not an exact quote, but investigate what a cost of service study would look like. Who does this? What would it cost? What would be the scope of it to make a baby step forward? Of course, this has been something on our to-do list for 4 years, and now we're talking about adding SB 382 rollout, 2 neighborhood plans, et cetera, et cetera. I'm thinking we're at a point where we're either going to have to simply delete the cost of service concept as undoable, or we're going to have to really figure out what we're going to do about this. I mean, are we going to do anything or not? And how would that impact these other newer planning efforts? So it's a comment. Feel free to comment if you want, but you don't have to.
So Mayor, actually Chris and Andy can potentially chime in here. We actually have, an RFP was put out for a cost of service study. We received a proposal. Several council members have been involved in looking at that and defining scope better. And I think, and Andy can address this, we were in the process of communicating back to the proposer about the scope. So
okay, great.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, we've been working with staff and then a small group of council to really refine that scope. We've selected a respondent for that RFP. We have not developed a contract yet. So right now, I actually just got an email after talking with Chris this afternoon. We will set up a meeting with that group to say, hey, is this the final scope we want to go with? Bring a contract to you guys, hopefully by the end of this fiscal year for approval, because it is in the FY23 budget.
Awesome. Great. Thanks very much. Councilmember Trickey?
You did it again. That was literally the question I was going to ask. So I'll just make my 2 quick comments really quickly. I'm really glad to see that planning for the big picture is in the budget and we're moving forward, even no matter what the reason was for it. I'm glad to see that that's there. And just a heads up, code enforcement, given the conversation that we had last night about excess trash, you may be getting a request to, I don't know, help Public Works deal with it. Am I making sense?
I saw part of the presentation, so yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten to talk to Tina yet.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So
okay.
It seems like the logical next step, given what we were talking about last night.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Tidswell, do you have anything?
Great presentation. Thanks, Wyatt. No questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Purington.
The only question that I have, Wyatt, would have to do with, you had 7 annexations and 16 zone changes. So with that going through, that was on page 4 of your, okay. So with that, what does that compare to as we started with Recode? I guess just build it out a little bit for me to see where we're at.
Councilmember Purington and Mayor and Council. So in terms of annexation activity, we actually had this 2022, like I have reported here, was 7. 2021 was a record year. I think we had 15 or somewhere in the ballpark of 15 annexations, which you all, I'm trying to remember them all, but you all were involved in that as well. And yeah, that was the most we'd ever had that I, looking back 20 years, could find in terms of activity. So there was a lot of those coming in, and I would say that we had 2 PNDs specifically in 2022, but we've had quite a few planning board developments, and you're aware of this too, because you've seen them come through that have been tied to those annexations. So in terms of the new zoning code, there's been a lot of activity and a lot of interest and application of it through that process just itself. Some of those other zone changes were existing, again, the P&D requirements is 10 acres or more, so those were smaller properties that maybe were doing one single zone change to another zone, or were several. So we had that happening too, but definitely a lot of activity. I think some of the reason with 21 was we actually had some pent-up demand because everyone was waiting for the code to get adopted and they were wanting to come in and do things. So yeah, those are definitely tied together. You're pointing that out accurately.
So what about the zone changes? Was there an increase? Because that was the intent, I think, with Recode, so that we would have less, and I just don't have a context for
Yeah,
it.
Councilmember, we can get the look back a couple of years. That seems to be not more, but in the sort of the same, again, with the PNDs being part of that because of that now tied to the annexations. But we can get a couple of years further back and get that to you so you can see. I would say that it's challenging because what we've seen with some of this, not only with the annexations where they then have to zone to city zoning, we've had existing infill and internal property or existing properties that are trying to position and do different types of development. So they are still changing the zoning, not because of any specific code flaw, but because they're trying to adjust for some, whatever they're planning for. But we can give you several years worth.
Well, and since this is a budget session, I don't really expect it under budget, but as we go into those text amendments, maybe that would be a good place to get that information. Thanks, Wyatt.
Thank you. Councilor Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. Wyatt, a couple of years ago, we did an ordinance for the massage parlors. It'd be nice if you could update us maybe from history of what happened, how many we started out with and how many massage parlors, if any, are still left over. That'd just be a nice update sometime.
Yeah, actually, we can, Andy, Finance Director, we did an update, and I'm trying to remember, we can do a refresher on that and send that out to you, because I can't remember when that was done. But we've had great success, and we've been continuing to monitor and watch, because there's been a couple that we've think are potentially looking for ways to get around the code and also just different things. But yeah, it's been successful. We can send that to you.
I just think we need to say how good we are in that process. And then second, maybe Tina, we've heard good things about you. Seriously, that's been good. The only good thing is, how are we coming on City Hall? Did we ever get that graffiti taken care of at the front door? Okay.
Can you, people listening would not have been able to hear that, so can you repeat maybe, Wyeth?
Yes, and actually, so Councilmember Boyette, you're talking about the phone and stuff out front, or no?
There's two white pillars that have some graffiti on them.
Oh, graffiti,
Yeah.
okay. So that's been referenced or
Then
sent to
referred on to facilities, per the comment earlier. One of the challenges is making sure we, as an entity, are taking care of graffiti as soon as possible. And Kevin just showed me some pictures of that. We're having challenges at the new City Hall that people are tagging it regularly. So we need to stay on top of that.
And then lastly, the 1950 phone outside that the mayor's been trying to get rid of for 4 years. How are we coming on that?
Shows you how effective I am.
We're polishing it up as a relic. The cord's on back order and the phone, but
I need, no, we just need the right side to Allen Ranch. I've investigated this, so we'll between you and I, we'll get it. Okay. But we got to keep it. If we take it, we keep it, okay. Councilor Ripsis.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, just, the only comment I was going to have was related to what you termed as your long-term service agility. So just kind of thinking of, as we go forward, how can we address, everything from homelessness to housing affordability, security, neighborhood refurbishment, all that kind of stuff. So putting together a plan like that, again, it's not all in one year, but how do we grow into that? So I'm looking forward to hearing those when you come forward with that. And then just to pile on with code enforcement, just a little different twist though. You've been sending your staff to the neighborhood task force meetings. Very well received. Thank you for doing that. They're great. People love talking to them, hearing from them, and each time they come out, they seem to have a different topic they want to talk about. So I think that's a very good way to get the word out, and those guys are doing a great job. Appreciate that. Thanks.
Ditto. Very good, Council. I think that's the end of our questions. We'll open up public comment. Is there any public comment on the planning, code enforcement, community development element? No one is coming forward here. No one online. We'll close that public comment period. It's 7:40. Appreciate the patience of our TBID representatives. We'll take a brief break, try to come back here as close to 7:45 as possible and get started again with our TBID. Thank you. See you in a few minutes. Norovirus that they knocked out St. Vincent with. You're lucky. All right, welcome back, everybody. We left off with our fourth bullet on item number 1, the Tourism Business Improvement District. And that's our last item on item 1. So Alex or George or Steve or whoever.
Good morning, council, or afternoon, evening. We're having so much fun. My name is Steve Warlick. I'm the owner of the Best Western Plus, Clock Tower Inn, and beautiful downtown Billings. I should have said the fabulous Best Western Plus, Clock Tower Inn, and beautiful downtown Billings, in all difference to Mike. And as
Just
well
trademark that. He would have to sue you if you
I
did.
know. Well, he borrows from me, and I borrow from him. Before we begin in going through the marketing plan and having George and Alex and the staff go through, I thought what would be, if you'll indulge me, about 3 to 4 minutes to give you a little background of what a T-bid is, since most of you weren't here when it started. So back in 2006, Billings hosted the Harley Owners Group, the HOG Group, and it was a citywide event. Long story short, we had to come up with $8,000. And we did bake sales, we did car washes, we did everything known to mankind to raise $8,000 to have a citywide for 5 days. And what we came up with, there's got to be a better way. This is stupid. And so after doing some research and talking to a variety of people, there was this entity or this thing called the Tourism Business Improvement District. Well, at that time, Billings had already adopted their first BID in downtown. And so we went forth and we looked at it a little bit more. We put forth legislation in 2006. The governor signed it early 2007 to create the opportunity for a community to adopt a tourism business improvement district. The beauty of what the Tourism Business Improvement District is very similar to what we have as the bid. There are only 2 major changes that I would tell you. One is that the properties do not have to be contiguous. So in the BID in downtown, all of the properties have to be contiguous. Well, when you go to sign up people, it's difficult because hotel properties are not contiguous. So that was one item. The other item that we were able to do, what has actually ended up benefiting the BID, is that we created zones. So what happened is that you can have up to 6 zones. So one of the things that the BID has adopted is they have the clean and safe zone, and then they have the safe zone. So they have 2 zones. We could do it the same. And the reason we did this is because being the first on the block, we were very concerned about small properties, big properties, and being equitable. So we put that in there. So that's been a benefit. The mission really of the Billings T-bid is to promote, market, and sell the community. And the way in which we do it is that we assess guests. And so whether or not you're from Sydney, whether it's Sydney, Australia, Sydney, Montana, Denver, or wherever, basically what we do is we assess guests on a per room, per night basis. And that's how we collect the funds. Just like the bid, the city is the governing body. We chose the governing body being the city versus the county. And they appoint a board. In our particular board, it has to be of hoteliers or the property owners of the hoteliers or their designee. So we have a 7-person board. It basically consists of 2 small properties, basically 70 units or less, 3 middle properties, 70 to 149 units, and 2 members from 150 units on up. And so we have a balance. So the whole idea was to ensure that we had a balance. Things that I want at my property may be different than what the northern needs or from there. The assessment, and it's not a tax. And I think all too often people get to the point, well, it's just a tax. It's not. It's an assessment. It's controlled by the hoteliers and our stakeholders. The 7-member board really answers to the stakeholders and indirectly to the governing body, you, the council. I will tell you in the 16 years that we've had a T-bid in Billings, while we've had arguments, we've never had a problem. We have, when we first implemented the T-bid, we had roughly 70% of the properties approve it. On our renewal back in 2017, it was closer to 85. And once we got over 80, it was sort of like, let's don't worry about the rest from there. So that's a little of the background. We Yeah, I will tell you on the board, the biggest item that we look at is how do we, and this is probably not the most proper way, but it's how do we put another button in bed? So when you look at it, going back to Metro Park and working with the county, if we did not pay the community improvement fee or the capital improvement fee for basketball tournaments, we would not have basketball tournaments in this city. We would not have wrestling tournaments, so that we've done things. When Garth Brooks was here, we put forth, the county came to us, or Metro Park really came to us and said, can you help out? We did. You look at American Airlines. So when we were going there and we were getting the small community air grant, the first group that stepped up with $387,000 was the T-bid. And if you have to look at it from our standpoint, that's 187,000 room nights that we have to generate. We didn't look at it that way. What we looked at, what was the best for the community, what's the best for travel and tourism, the business community. And so I think one of the things in partnering with the city and various entities, we've always looked at what's in the best for our shareholders as well as the community. So that's a little bit of history. You now have the Reader's Digest version. So with that, I'll introduce the managing partner from the Northern Hotel, who is the chairman of the T-bid, and George Maragos. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. George.
Well, good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm George Maragos with the Northern Hotel and also chair of the Billings T-bid Board of Directors. We are excited to present to you this evening the fiscal year 24 priorities, budget, and marketing plan. You will hear from the Visit Billings team and I this evening, and we look forward to answering any questions you may have as we head into fiscal year 24. There is no cap on enthusiasm with us believing in Billings as a tourism destination. The proof that the impact of the industry can't be ignored shows with more than 2.6 million people visiting Billings annually. At the same time, the positive economic impact of tourism to Billings and on Yellowstone County can't be overstated at $621 million in new money to Billings yearly. We are excited about the next 12 months and appreciate your continued support of our marketing, sales, and tourism strategies for Billings. There are so many reasons people visit Billings, and T-bid funding helps create the story for regional, national, and international visitors to make Billings part of their business, leisure, conference, sports, or group tour itineraries. The budget, as you know, also goes to help with fostering air service, product development, and creating more opportunities and reasons for people to choose Billings. The primary mission of Visit Billings is to generate room nights. Yes, Steve said it, heads in beds, or butts in beds. But why
They kind of go together. It's different. It's awkward if they're not together.
Yeah, they have to be, what this is important is that it fills hotels, motels, and campgrounds equate to dollars in all businesses, including but not limited to restaurants, retailers, and attractions. It's one big support system, and we need each other. Tourism in Billings also supports more than 10,000 jobs locally, and Montana's tourism industry saves property owners nearly $900 per year in taxes. I do want to take a moment to share the importance of tourism to all industries in the city. Tourism is not only an industry all in itself, driving people to businesses, but it's also woven into the fabric of all other major industries in Billings. Medical tourism, education, the financial industry, energy. Each of these industries is supported by tourism, and tourism supports each of these industries. Before we dive into the fiscal year 24 strategies, let's look at the successes from the current fiscal year and recent calendar years from a data perspective. Looking at 2022, annual occupancy sat at nearly 70%, and average annual ADR, average daily rate, about $121. Spring tourism is our strongest in occupancy and room demand, as this slide outlines, with, of course, our spring events, mostly sports, help driving spring occupancy to be quite strong, including Montana High School Association events, as well as Big Sky Volley Fest, Magic City Soccer, and PBR, to name only a few. Of visitors to Billings, 77% stay a night or more, while 31% are day trippers. This data is from Smith Travel Research and Zardico, two of our research partners. One more data slide for a broader view. You'll see here annual room demand changes from year to year, including recovery from the pandemic and annual average occupancy trends, which you can see the strength in the industry. We continue to gain momentum in room demand, growing and sustaining growth year over year. Our TBID leadership and my colleagues are critical to guiding the TBID strategies and staff. You'll note the TBID leadership here. Of course, these are all appointees of this body, and we appreciate your support. This body helps drive efforts like the current $375,000 commitment of board restricted reserves to help with the Small Community Air Service Development Grant and sports facility efforts. Next, I want to share who is who with our Visit Billings team. You'll see them up there, many of whom you'll hear from tonight. We are proud of the work of the board leadership and of course the Visit Billings staff executing our direction. And now, speaking of the Visit Billings team, I'm proud to introduce the Leisure Marketing Director, Allie, for more on the next fiscal year strategies and a brief look back. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, Mayor Cole and council members for having us here tonight. As George said, my name is Allie Eggert. I'm the Leisure Marketing Director for Visit Billings. And what I'm going to talk to you about today and then pass it on to the rest of our team is obviously my job is to increase leisure visitation. And so before I dive into that, I want to share a little bit about how we did last year. I think every year we bring you these really beautiful campaigns that we plan on sending out into the world, and we never really get a chance to follow up with you on how they did. So I'm just going to share a few numbers. I won't get into every detail on the slide, mostly because not everyone loves numbers as much as the marketer in the room. But as you'll remember, last year we had a campaign called Approved by Dogs for Humans, where we followed a four-legged friend and his family on a road trip through Montana. Last year, our data showed that more people were road tripping than flying, and so we knew that was a really great opportunity to carve out our share of the 4 million visitors who travel to Yellowstone National Park each year. And so some of the numbers I'd like to note is, just under 300,000 people driven to the visitbillings.com website, and the video completion rate of 95%. That is a very, very high video completion rate for advertisements. How many of you have been served an ad that you can easily go, oh, skip ad, I don't want to watch the end of that video? 95% of people were watching the end of our videos, which tells us that we were doing something right. I also want to dive into a little bit about how we market us as a fall winter destination. We're unique in Billings as compared to some of our other Montana destinations that might have a ski hill. We know what we have to offer here in Billings, and we know that it's still a great thing to offer to our visitors. And so what we market is our arts and culture scene, our amazing events, all the things that happen at the Alberta Bear and the Babcock, the amazing food scene. New this year was the holiday nights at the zoo. All are things that make people want to stay the night in Billings and spend dollars in our community during those winter months. So again, another 134,000 people visiting the visitbillings.com website to explore what we have to offer in the winter. Get my slideshow here. Okay. As you'll remember, in 2022, we had a 500-year flood shut down Yellowstone National Park. So obviously, we had to pivot our marketing. We knew a lot of people were still planning their trips to Montana, and we wanted to ensure that they still plan their time in Billings. And so we launched the Event Fest campaign, where we talked about the Mustangs baseball, Magic City Blues, Balloon Fest, all of the awesome events that make Billings such a great destination in the summertime. And that was an extremely well-performing campaign for us. Again, another 113,000 people driven to our website and visiting and looking at the different opportunities. But it was also a really great way for us to support our partners in their first real full event season back post-pandemic. And then I also want to touch on the public relations work that we do. We host journalists and influencers from all over the country and bring them into the city to tell our story, to help us share why we're a great destination. And so there's a little bit of information on some of the features that we've had, but also exciting excited to be hosting more journalists again this summer. I have one slated for the week after next for Insider Magazine, so that's very exciting. But overall, I wanted to share 400,000 people almost visited our Visit Billings website. But another fact that's worth pointing out is that 32,000 clicks to partner sites. That means they clicked into our website, saw something they liked, and then clicked on a partner site. Think of Moss Mansion, think our hotels, think our restaurants. So they showed true interest that they were doing a trip here. And so I think it's important to show that, that partnership and that we're sending people to our great assets that make our city, once again, a wonderful destination. So with that being said, I'm going to pivot into our FY24 strategies and what we have planned for this summer. And I'm going to do that by telling a little bit of a story. So here in Billings, we are here for anyone who loves being outside. Yes, outside as in outdoors outside, but also outside the norm. People who embrace pure Montana in all its forms. People who go against the grain and believe that normal just isn't good enough. People who crave boldness and authenticity. Billings was built on that outsider spirit, that despite appearances and naysayers, no climb was too steep, no trail too rocky, no burger too juicy. On the idea of staying true to our roots that is more important than fitting in, that's what's great about Billings. We have been authentic Montana since 1882. And maybe that makes us the outsiders of the bunch, but we're just fine with that because we are the world's biggest fan of being outside. As we say, forge your own path. So this is our summer, a little peek at some of our summer creative, which some of you may have seen on billboards around town. We invite people to be an outsider. We're welcoming outsiders. Everything about Billings is what we want to display is that we have so much to offer, whether you're an outsider in the unique food that you like, the unique arts and culture, the history, or just outdoor recreation. We have what you are looking for. So a little bit of research on why we choose to market the way that we choose to. The U.S. Travel Foundation is forecasting an increase in travel spending this year over FY22. We see a renewed emphasis on food-focused travel. We are a foodie destination. We have really great offerings from a variety of chefs, pastries, etc. 90% of travelers want to experience a destination like a local. So when we talk about why we message things to our visitors like a local, it's because they want to experience things like a local. They want to experience our local restaurants. And then of course, 1/3 of American travelers use online video to help plan their trip. They want to see that stunning imagery and especially of Big Sky Country. So who are our target markets? As you can see, our origin markets for visitors, 73% of our visitors are from out of state. And so as you'll remember from years past, our target markets are always those direct fly markets. Think Seattle, Salt Lake, Denver, Dallas, Chicago, and Minneapolis. But emerging this year, and we've seen a lot of visitors from, is Houston, Portland, and Phoenix, Arizona. So they'll be included into our market. And then, of course, we have a regional drive market, which includes Wyoming, South Dakota, North Dakota, and all of Montana outside of Billings. And that's where that winter campaign and those events campaign perform heavily. Sorry. Yeah, you're good. So ultimately, our goal is to drive year-round visitation to Billings, and we do that by building marketing campaigns that showcase who we are. We're launching the Be an Outsider campaign, but also those niche marketing campaigns like summer events, road races, foodie, brew trail, two-wheel motorcycle market are all important. We'll continue to promote the Great American Road Trip and again, try to get our share of those 4 million visitors headed to Yellowstone National Park each year. And then of course, continuing our public relations and earned media efforts. And we do this by using a multimedia strategy. In drive markets versus national fly markets, that looks a bit different. Obviously, Meta is a very important tool for us. That's Facebook and Instagram for those that aren't familiar. And everyone knows that everyone's on one of those two channels. So for us to be strong in those channels is very important. But then we also strategically place out-of-home billboards within and around Billings to try to pull some of that traffic that's coming off the interstate. So either direction you're driving on the interstate, you will see a billboard from Visit Billings inviting you off the interstate. Plus we have one coming from the interstate on North 27th Street on the back of the securities building, and then another one capturing some airport traffic on the north facing on North 27th Street. And then lastly, obviously keeping our social media channels strong. Yeah, Alex, sorry. Keeping our social media strategy strong in the organic space is very important to us because that is where we tell our story like a local, and that's where we interact with our visitors like a local. So those are very important features for us to spend time, and also just to create that visual representation of what to expect when you visit Billings. And then lastly, one of the things that I want to point out that we're developing is a plan your trip section on our website that will have everything all in one place. We get a lot of questions of, when I get there, are there Ubers? Is there public transportation? How do I rent a car? And we really want to have that all in one place for our visitor experience. So that'll be happening this year as well. So with that, I'm honored to turn it over to Evan Decker, our sports tourism manager.
Thank you. Good evening, Council and Mayor Cole. My name is Evan Decker. I'm the sports tourism manager with Visit Billings. Been with the organization for 7 months now. I'm coming from Phoenix, Arizona, so I'm happy to have the nice warm weather back at this point. But, basically with sports tourism manager, it's the same thing with any other tourism, heads in beds, or in my case, ballers in beds. So for my goals for really, at the end of the day is to generate room nights through sporting events and recruiting different sporting events to the area. Outside of that, it's partnering with organizations like MSUB and RMC in getting other NCAA and IA events, growing and expanding existing events. And for this next fiscal year, I'm looking at supporting 30 events, either longstanding or new events into the community, and just to touch on a few tactics with that, I just came back from an event called Sports ETA, which hosts a number of different sports organizers and planners to, look at the different regions in the area and figure out where, would be someplace to bring a new event to or an event that's longstanding. Outside of that, I'm developing a new marketing campaign for Billings itself to encourage folks to bring their events here, as well as develop a sports sales toolkit to help those planners when they come. In addition to that, I'm working on receiving my STS, which is a certified sports tourism designation. I'm working with that through Sports ETA. Other than that, working with key sport holders in the community, beginning planning logistics for a 2024 Sports Planner FAM Tour, which would be bringing in those sports organizers and really showing them what all we can do here in Billings. And, outside of that, working on my marketing plan, going from there. So Visit Billings will continue to support the longstanding events that we have already supported in the past, which include MHSA events, Big Sky Volley Fest, Big Sky Ballin', All-American Indian Shootout, NCAA D2 cross-country regionals, so on and so forth. And then we're also looking forward to bringing in a few new events into the community, which include the USPA Area 1 Championships, which is the U.S. Practical Shooting Association's Area 1 Championships, Tour Montana, which will be a Tour de France style cycling event, which will start here in Billings, work its way up the Beartooth Highway and come back around into Billings itself. The Montana Winter Classic Pro-Am, which is a racquetball event that we have already hosted, and many more in the future. So the future of sports tourism in Billings. So what I plan to do is have a continued presence at sports tourism trade shows, conferences, symposiums, new marketing campaigns geared towards event owners and organizers, and fostering Billings as the regional sports destination and capital, as I would call it. Other than that, the next piece of this is going to be my sports marketing. And one of the things that I'm really looking forward to, which will be launching in a few days, will be our sports page on the Visit Billings website. This will be a location where event organizers or families will be able to go and see what all the facilities we have to offer to host an event, where a family can bring, the team for a team-friendly lunch, different hotel options that'll be around the corner from the facilities themselves. And in addition to that, an RFP section where an event organizer can send me the logistics of what their event will look like and see if I can place them in the right facility here in Billings. And with that, I'm going to bring up my special programs manager, Luke.
Hello, Mayor and Council. So I wanted to take a few slides to talk about the visitor experience. My role is projects and programs, and we use these to craft that visitor experience in our city. And so for the goals in the coming year, we want to raise awareness of the value of tourism throughout the community, foster that support in diversity and inclusion, and then of course, continue our education for frontline staff in our city. Tactics, continue encouraging stakeholders to become certified autism organizations. We want to make sure if you're an autistic traveler, you are welcome in our city. We're going to develop a full advocacy campaign that educates Billings community and residents on the benefits economically of tourism. And then I'm really excited, we'll go into this in a bit, formally introduce the Certified Tourism Ambassador Program. So on the program front, in 2019, we launched Trail Guides, and this is an education piece for the importance of tourism in our city, region, and state. And then I'm really happy, it kind of drives community pride. If you visit our homepage of the website, scroll down until you see a big video of Rand's hats. It was part of that kind of promotion. But if you watch that video, I don't know how you cannot be proud of some of the business people we have in our city working today. And this is what I'm really excited about this summer. It's going to coexist with our Trail Guides program, but it's Certified Tourism Ambassador Program. It's a more in-depth course that leads to a certification. So it's going to be a half-day course for frontline staff, hoteliers, restaurant employees, retailers. But it's going to dive into the history of our region. It's going to kind of help them understand how that history has influenced our current culture. And then they're going to understand what to sell when it comes to talking to a visitor. And that's also going to coincide with a new History Buff page update, which we'll talk about the city first before we kind of look outward. And that was due to some comments from this board. Thank you. And then this is the next slide, my personal favorite. There we go. Oh, you got it. Can't skip this one. And so on the project front, we like to really show this off. It's nearly a decade old now, but we started collectively marketing the fantastic breweries we have in the city as kind of one experience. And it's done incredibly well. Last year during Craft Beer Week, we launched a digital brew passport for this. And so we partnered with every single brewery in the city, every distillery, and the winery to kind of promote these businesses to visitors so that a visitor isn't going to pick a favorite. They're going to go everywhere. And with that, this year, with the same format, we understand we might have travelers who are sober. You might be a family traveler. The brewery scene isn't your scene. We wanted to offer a similar kind of product for those visitors. And so we've started Trailhead Treats, which is the same model, but bakeries, ice cream shops, classic diners. Stella's and Bernie's will get along on this, I promise. And so we're really kind of excited to put that out. It just launched 2 weeks ago, and so we're creating some good buzz with that. But I think it's going to do incredibly well. And the Brew Trail, from what we've seen, it is a smash hit. So thank you so much for kind of hearing me out there. And our executive director, Alex Tyson, will take it from here.
Thank you, Luke. Alex.
They get all the fun stuff, for sure. I wanted to continue on with some of our priorities, including meeting and convention recruitment. We typically help anywhere between 30 to 50 meetings and conventions come to Billings on an annual basis. That also includes servicing them. So it's one thing for us to build relationships and foster relationships with the meeting planners across the nation, across the West region, and across the state, for them to host meetings in our 5 meeting hotels and then some of our off-site venues. But once we get them here, once we've done the site inspection, once they've contracted with the hotels, it's very important for us to make sure that their attendees have a great time. And that's everything from helping with registration, come early, stay late tours, those types of things. And we also make sure that there's a financial incentive where applicable to make sure that maybe they do a 3-year contract meeting in Billings, making sure that we're incentivizing them in that sale. But those relationships are very important to us in the group tour market as well. International and domestic tours are very important to our overall economy. On any ever, probably like 90 days in the heart of the summer, you'll always see a bus maybe parked outside of the DoubleTree, perhaps at the Hilton Garden Inn, some of our other hotels who have busloads of people who are coming here. And most of those are domestic tours. Some of them are international, but most of them are domestic. And they're part of that Great American Road Trip. They stay here. Maybe they're coming from Rapid City, Devil's Tower, Mount Rushmore, Devil's Tower, one of the battlefields or one of the monuments, Little Bighorn Battlefield or Pompey's Pillar. They enjoy a dinner and some time here in Billings. They wake up the next morning, explore a little bit, and then they're off to typically Yellowstone right after us, or we're catching them on the opposite direction. But those types of visitors, also leisure visitors, are very important to us, and we'll continue to foster those relationships and those contracts with some of those groups. So understanding that our leisure visitation is the foundation of everything that we do, it helps all of our hoteliers, helps all of our restaurants, retailers, and attractions, fostering that sports tourism piece We've obviously been here when the sports facility has been on the agenda. You know our support for that. We've also, started in 2012 by making sure that sports tourism was something that we were actively promoting and actively growing as a segment for tourism. 2017, making sure that we had the Victus advisor study for a sports feasibility study, and then obviously all of the work that you have all done that we continue to support. The recruiting meetings, the conferences, reunions, servicing sports, servicing meetings and conferences, the international marketplace, domestic tours. Steve already alluded to all of the work that we're doing with the airport and continuing to foster the capacity, and then our strategic plan. We began the strategic planning process last February. We hope to have the actual, we have the draft plan, but we hope to have the formal plan that we'll be ready to adopt and implement in this fiscal year. And of course, we will bring that to you in a formal presentation, and we're excited about many of the pieces of that strategic plan that help us with a roadmap through 2027, which will be the next renewal of the TBID. So as a whole, we inspire people to come to Billings for many, many reasons. Our marketing dollars allow us to do that. A lot of people want to come to Montana, but once you tell them about Montana, they're not really sure how to get here. We use our funds to make sure that we orient them and tell them how they can get here and help them plan their trip. And once they're here, to Luke's points, servicing them, making sure that our residents have great communications with them, that they feel welcomed in our community, and facilitating that stay, making sure that maybe they even stay longer than their initial itinerary had planned. Those are all parts of our investment. So wanting to make sure that we run through our projected revenue is actually 1.725 this year. We have some canceled projects and some carryover that will take us to 1.828280. For the most part, it equates to about 34% of our overall budget going to leisure marketing, 8% going to meetings and convention recruitment, 15% of our budget goes to sports tourism, 14% of our budget goes towards the visitor experience, and then assets, reserves, grants, administration, about 29%. And this would be the budget that we would present to you for approval next month, heading into fiscal year 24. And we're open to any questions that you would have.
Thank you, Alex, and to your whole team. Excellent presentation. I'm always impressed by just the simple quality of the materials, the printed materials, the video materials, the photography, whatever it is. And you do us proud, and we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Who haven't we started with? Councilmember Ripsis, you want to, okay.
No questions. Nice presentation.
Okay, back around here.
Okay, so I have a question, but I have a little anecdote. So I was at the chamber for a meeting last fall. A couple pulled up, they had paddle boards on top of their car. They got out, they were like, we want to go paddle boarding on the Yellowstone River. Where do we go? I had no idea, how to tell them how to get there. The chamber wasn't open for them to come in and ask questions. So my question to you is, you guys do an excellent job. I feel like great presentation. I love seeing all of it. Once visitors are here, or if they just stop by, where can they access kind of all the materials that you have, and how can we do a better job about that as a community? Because I think you have guides, you have all of these things, but I couldn't point them to, go to this visitor center or, for example.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Councilmember Shaw, Mayor, Council. This is an ongoing issue that we have. At one point we had, this is just really the changing phases of what a visitor wants and desires upon their trip. There was a time when we probably had anywhere between 18 to 22,000 people who were coming through wanting visitor information and facilitation at the chamber, which at one point was a designated visitor information center. We had 25 to 28 volunteers on any given day, or any given season, and we also were open most weekends. Fast forward to that number came down to about 3,000 before the pandemic. We also had fewer volunteers who were interested in assisting us, although we do have great volunteers. And then through the pandemic, a lot of things changed. I think a lot of it has to do with the location, not like the most important priority is to understand that the needs of visitors have changed and how they garner their information has drastically changed. But also we have changed. And we have also, we've looked at different types of facilities, different buildings, different ways for us to foster that relationship with the visitor and to also make sure that we're facilitating them appropriately. So if they arrive via air, we have the visitor center and a lot of that information and the printed materials that are at the visitor center at the airport are from our inventory. We also contract with Certified Folder. So if you're in any of the convenience stores, any of our hotels and that sort of thing, those racks we contract with and most of our materials are available in those racks. We also have priorities right now within the strategic plan for us we've had conversations with Jeff Ewelt at the zoo to make sure as they're redoing some of their entrances that we're going to also have some visitor facilitation. Luke also has plans on training some of their staff to help facilitate and almost become like a mobile visitor center of some sort for people, not mobile, but kind of like a one-off. We've had conversations with YRPA to do a Dover Park Visitor Center. We've also offered them funding to help them with any type of kiosks, visitor information that we can help them with. And we've had conversations with Katie Easton. We want to make sure that there's digital opportunities downtown for people to be able to approach and kind of swipe through certain types of kiosks, digital kiosks that would give them information. And then finally, the mall would be one of those as well. And then finally, we want to go to where a lot of the visitors are. So you'll see us this year at Strawberry Fest, Harvest Fest, obviously the air show, and a lot of the sports events that we have. We try to be there in front of the visitors, talking to them at those times too. So long sort of answer to your question.
But you answered my question. You're having this conversation ongoing, and I appreciate that. That's all I wanted to know, that you're trying to figure it out, because I don't know, that moment has stuck with me of they were driving through, right? They weren't going to stay the night. They wanted to just paddleboard on the Yellowstone River, and I was at a total loss.
Yeah. And I think the only other thing that I would note is through Luke's programs and through that CTA, the more that we can educate residents and then even our hospitality workforce to have those really good conversations with people, and the more that we know as residents about our community, the sharper that we'll be able to be to help to steer them in the right direction.
Absolutely.
And the last thing would be is, there's been a couple of days, even last summer, where, and this is, kind of a one-off conversation, but, we have people who would come up to the chamber and we're like, okay, let's open up today. And let's just see if for 3 hours, if we're open, who are we missing? Because it's disconcerting to us.
Mm-hmm.
We field texts, emails, and phone calls all day long, all weekend long. But what we found out was there was not one person that wanted visitor information. They wanted public restrooms, coffee, the DMV, and the post office. So where we are located right now is not ideal, but we know that we have work to do in that realm.
Okay, I appreciate that. I like the kiosk idea. You don't need volunteers. Nobody has to manage that overly much, but the information's there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gulick?
Thank you. Yeah, excellent presentation, and yeah, I really appreciate how it really improves the quality of life for residents. So the work that TBID does, and it really helps with civic pride. I mean, you do really high quality work in graphically compelling stuff, and we made use of packets. We have a family event this summer, and made use of your Forge Your Own Path, and these are people coming from around the world, so it was exciting for them to be able to use your materials in planning. Looking forward to helping with the visitor experience in the future with improvements in downtown that I know are ongoing. And question I have though is unfortunately some of our people who are staying coming from around the world are staying at Airbnbs. Is there any way for us to capture? Are we capturing any of that money? Does it go to the TBID at all?
Councilmember Gulick, thank you very much for the question. Not through the TBID, since that's just all hotels and motels in the area, but state lodging tax is being collected, I should say, And Steve could obviously talk a little bit more about that too. He has short-term rentals and has a lot more information from a state perspective and what that state lodging tax piece means. I think from a TBID point of view, there have been a couple of owners that have come to us and said, hey, when we give them printed materials and help them as much as we possibly can, we want to facilitate their guests at a high level as well. But I think a couple of the concerns that we have about bringing them into the TBID fold, if that was a continued conversation, some of them are open today, but not open tomorrow. Expanding the board to include owners who might not have they might have 6 rooms in their home as opposed to 249 hotel rooms. So there's a lot of differential there. But I know that we have had conversations about it, and we are glad that they're at least collecting state lodging tax at this time.
Thank you. Councilor Bernice?
Thank you. I like what I've seen. The only thing I would say is I know we have a lot of food trucks in town, and I think that's a really attractive thing, and that may be something you want to add to one of your trail things to get the food trucks together and start bringing them in that too. So it'd be a great food stop.
Thank you very much. Good comment.
Thank you. I assume Councilmember Owen is not online. So Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. I just have a question, because I'm interested in creative process. Not that this has anything to do with the budget, but who came up with the idea of the dog, and how did you do that? Because that was so fantastic, and if you can understand the process, you can do it again. So how did that happen? Thank you.
Make sure.
So we work with an agency of record, Sunshine and Bourbon. We've been partners with them for past 5-ish years, and they are creatively wonderful. I mean, I don't really have much more to say than that, but they have definitely elevated our marketing materials to the next level, which is where we needed to be. And I think that there's just a lot of brainstorming happening. If you scroll our social media, my yellow lab explores Billings with me a lot. And I think it was a little bit of conversation of, when people are road tripping, they likely have their dogs. We wrote a few blogs on, what to do in Billings with your dog. Where are the dog-friendly hotels, patios, parks? What's important to know when you're exploring which parks are leash, off leash versus on leash and stuff like that. So it's really just a lot of brainstorming. I think on any given day, our office is always throwing stuff at the wall to see what's going to be the next fun idea to stick. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. I just love the authentic Montana catchphrase. I think that really captures Billings so well. I'll just make a comment, which is I'm hoping for the day where we have a downtown tour business that where visitors can come to, probably in conjunction with a information center, and get a tour of our city in a neat vehicle or on foot of our historic homes, interesting downtown stories, maybe of the rims. Great cities always have those downtown tours, and we don't. Throw in a ghost tour at night, So that's not something the Chamber of Billings is going to do by itself, but it certainly could support it. So I just throw that out and would love to help promote that if we could ever find the right vendor and promoter who would do it. So,
If I may, Mayor, Kevin Koistra and his team at Western Heritage Center is who a lot of the times will direct people to. They do the Hoof It with a historian during the summertime. And a lot of times if we have a larger group or even a meeting or a convention, they'll we'll help subsidize that tour, or they will, it's like $5 a person, and they'll do whatever tour it is that you would like them to do. So keep that in mind. In the meantime, I think we're all have this level of entrepreneurship in us, and we all talk about how, oh my gosh, we really should just break away and buy vans and become tour guides. Yeah, because you're right.
Great.
It's
all
a
right.
weak point. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
So if anybody's listening out there, call Alex and we'll set you up and support you. Councilmember Tricky.
Just to follow up to that, what is our sweet spot for a downtown convention? Meaning what's the size? How many people?
Yeah, we're really a small market meeting destination at this point. We used to be able to do larger meetings. Now we usually are about that 450 or fewer. There's Billings Hotel and Convention Center can do more than that. It just depends on what the planner is wanting. What we've really gone to now for some of the state associations, like the Montana Stock Growers Association, we split those between the DoubleTree and the Northern. And George would be able to share a little bit more on that. But those two properties coming together, if there's a planner who wants to be downtown, especially for that walkability piece for restaurants and some of the attractions, that's important. And they're able to do general session at one hotel, general session at another, maybe vendors and the trade shows are mixed breakouts, then you have more breakouts, breakout capacity. The other thing that we have started doing is utilizing Alberta Bear Theater. There's a group that we're bringing in, National Association of County Extension Agents in 2025. It's about 1,200 people, and they definitely wanted to come to Montana, and we had them on site several times, and we were able to contract that group. They'll be doing all of their general sessions at Alberta Bear Theater, and then all of the rest of their meetings will be split between both the DoubleTree and the Northern Hotel. So there was a time we could do 1,000, 1,200. Now we really work closely with planners who can do that 450 or fewer, with the exception of the Billings Hotel and Convention Center.
Great, thanks. And I just wanted to say that it's really nice to see your department or whatever staffed back up, because I think that means that the pandemic actually really is over.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate.
Councilor Puritan?
Thank you. So I have a few questions. One of them in your book on page 45. You're talking about CVB budget. What is CVB?
So the CVB budget, so Visit Billings is part of we're the comprised brand of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, which is Billings' portion of the state lodging tax that we receive, and then the Tourism Business Improvement District. So we are the staff that manage both the CVB dollars and the TBID dollars, and we're managed by the Chamber of Commerce. So if you were to go stay the night tonight at George's property, and let's say that his rate for easy math was $100.
Yeah.
Leaving money on the table. You're immediately at 108 with 8% state lodging tax, and then that $2 for the TBID would get you to 110. But that 8%, which Billings pays out about $10 million a year to Helena, that money, the majority of it goes to the state's general fund, and certain amount of the 4%, which is the lodging facility use tax, a portion of that is reallocated to regions and CVBs so that we can continue that circle of making sure that people are paying that state lodging tax. And so that's another portion of our dollars. So that $10 million that we pay in, as far as Billings hotels pay into Helena, we get back $492,000 this year.
So in looking at your budget pages here, you've got a projected revenue of 1.8.
Correct.
So where does your revenue come from?
So on the TBID side, so the page that you were referencing was page 42, as from a TBID point of view on the 1.8, that's that $2 per occupied room per night. And so those are the dollars that we're here tonight offering you the projected budget for, and then what our planning is to execute and spend those funds. The CVB dollars we answer to the state of Montana on. So while all of our priorities align, and we answer to the Chamber CVB board, and we answer to the Tourism Business Improvement District board for both of these budgets.
Gotcha.
But we have to present to you the TBID budget, and we present to the state of Montana our CVB budget.
So the city of Billings actually does not provide funds for you, tax dollars, to you. But because of, I think, the way that George explained it was, that we are your governing agent or whatever. Okay, so thank you for that. Okay, so a couple of other questions, if I might. So with tourism, and we've talked about this a lot in our public safety talks, what sort of impact do you see with tourism, especially when you're bringing larger groups in? What sort of an impact do you see on our public safety resources as well as our medical resources?
I can speak specifically. When you look at tourism and 2.6 million people in a $621 million industry, I can't talk specifically about a specific impact on each event and that sort of thing. To answer previous questions from Councilmember Neese, we talked about impact to law enforcement. And I know that Steve would like to add some information on this comment on this question as well. I believe that Dan Brooks with the chamber looked, and we were at about 5% of all BPD calls, law enforcement calls, were to hotels of the 52 hotels that we have. And the majority of those calls were to just a handful of hotels or motels, of which most of the people who stay in those hotels are extended stay. And if you're extended stay, you don't pay a state lodging tax and you do not pay TBID.
Okay, interesting. So on your website traffic, you're talking about the views and whatever. Can you determine how many people actually visit based on what those numbers are? Can you say, well, out of those many thousands of people looking, we had X amount of people visit?
Thank you for the question, council member. That is, I think, Steve's burning question for me at every single board meeting. And the answer is yes and no. While marketing, we are very creepy and we can tell you who's looking at our site from what location. And we can tell you how many people visited Billings from that location. I can't tell you specifically that 285,000 visitors to our site, how many of them who visited our site also booked a trip to Billings. What we know is that our marketing campaigns are driving traffic because we are seeing an increase in demand in our lodging. So that's, and when we plan these marketing campaigns, we have key performance indicators that we follow. So are people actually clicking through to the website based on our ads? Are we marketing in the right place? Everything that we do is so heavily rooted in research that the minute something's not performing, we pivot and we move to a different outlet, or maybe we change our creative. And so we're always keeping an eye on that to be good stewards of our dollars, but also to make sure that we're providing the most welcoming messaging possible to potential visitors.
So you're seeing that the social media marketing is probably your biggest, best bet on getting people here.
Yeah, I would say very confidently, yes. Specifically Meta. Obviously, we're going to have some interesting new challenges with what's happened with the TikTok ban, and so that what we were dabbling in that market. Obviously, that'll likely shift to a YouTube or Meta, Facebook, Instagram, but also Google discovery campaigns, display campaigns. So, when you think about your online habits, say you're reading an article about Little Bighorn Battlefield, you've now told me that you're interested in the history of our region. And so now I'm going to put ads in front of you that show you our region and invite you to come. And so those are all things that help us indicate. And so you'll notice, display ads on articles that you see, where you might have something flash it, it's always kind of that, I thought about it and now it's here in front of me kind of mentality, so.
One other question, I'm gonna sneeze again, allergies. And this might be more for the hoteliers. Did you see an impact this past year with the MERA funds that, and probably not in your hotels so much as some of the other hotels, the impact that they had long-term stay because of the Emergency Rental Association or Act, whatever it was called? Did you see an impact, or have you heard from other hoteliers? Because I've heard it really did.
Yeah, no, Councilmember Mayor, the impact was there. I mean, if you look at it, and if you look at our occupancy, to take a 10% increase is fairly substantial in our marketplace. If you look at it, we're typically in the 60 to 65% from there. A variety of hotels did take that opportunity to do it. No different than what you see across the U.S., whether or not it's New York, California, or whatever. There are a variety of hotels that have opted to do this. Quite honestly, if you look at it, they're running 100% occupancy, minimal services, so on and so forth. You know, I'll speak for George as well as myself. It's not necessarily the business that we want, but there are operators in the town that do want it, and that's what's driven a portion of that occupancy.
Thank you. So just, thank you for all of your enthusiasm for Billings. I think it's great, you know, and we love visitors. We love good visitors, so I appreciate your involvement in this, and yeah, just keep marketing away.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. I see that you only have film recruitment at $1,000. I was just recently reading a book about our illustrious Mayor Frazier, who said that was dumb. We should do better. He got on the plane and went to Hollywood and came back and made a major film with Dustin Hoffman. So with that in mind,
I can't even get to
with that in
California
mind,
for $1,000.
with that in mind, I'm going to volunteer. I want to volunteer our mayor to go with you to fly to Hollywood and bring back a major movie. How's that? So he's already ready to go.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So the other question is, I've been all over the United States and Canada and Mexico to conventions. We don't have I almost think we need a convention center downtown in order to make this work. No, but I just went and did a talk to 240 HR directors at the Billings Hotel and Convention Center. It worked great because they could park, they could do everything. Are you working with anybody to bring a convention center by itself, just that, to downtown?
Mayor, Council Member Boyette, thank you for the question. We have worked very, very hard. So there was a time when we were really the it show in the region and in the state. You had the Holiday Inn, Grand Montana Convention Center, and the Montana Convention Center. And we were, I was alluding earlier to Councilmember Chiriki's question about how we would do 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 people, and they would be split between both the Holiday Inn Grand Montana, which is now the Montana Trailhead Inn, and the Billings Hotel and Convention Center. When the owners of the Holiday Inn Grand Montana stopped investing in that property and it became very dilapidated, we ended up having to stop selling that because you would walk in and there was duct tape on the seam of the carpet and we would lose business right away before we even started. So we had to be very cautious about that, but it was very hard for us to transition. However, at that point in time, what we decided to do was a convention center feasibility study that we would commission. And what happened was we had some of our stakeholders, TBID stakeholders, who filled out a petition against our efforts to do so because we would be putting them out of business, messing with their livelihoods if we had a standalone convention center. So we pulled back, continued obviously our meeting and convention recruitment and servicing efforts, of course, but we pulled back and the TBID board pulled back in those efforts. The Chamber of Commerce moved forward with those efforts, and we've had many conversations. We were part of many 18 months of conversations for One Big Sky District. And we had actually quite a bit of consensus on One Big Sky District and what that convention center, the Montana Station, was what it was going to be called, would have brought to Billings. But at this point, nothing since those energies were exhausted for One Big Sky District.
I was just meaning a convention center, not a hotel, not everything, just a convention.
The Montana Station was a convention center. Now you have the event center that's opening up over by Overland, Mr. Veter's property. That's a standalone events venue that we'll treat like we do Camelot Ranch or the Depot or the Babcock or the Alberta Bear. It's not like the Northern Hotel or the Doubletree or the Billings Hotel and Convention Center, Hilton Garden Inn or the Bighorn Resort. But that will help people come together. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex, just remind us, what percentage of our convention business have we lost since the high point? We knew that was coming because of the lack of facilities, but what's that percentage and what does that equate to in dollar terms, or however you want to describe it?
Yeah, we probably were at one good time, about 28 to 30%. of our visitation, and now we're probably closer to anywhere between 13 to 14, maybe 15% on a given year. I will say that we have really good, and I know that George is here, and he could allude to it, but a lot of our recruitment and a lot of the dates are for 2025, 2024, 2025 are locked in. I mean, a lot of the planners right now who want to be at Billings Hotel and Convention Center, or want to be maybe like even straddling the Northern Hotel and the DoubleTree, they don't have the same dates available. So we immediately lose them because we're not able to share those hotels. If the Northern doesn't have the same date as the DoubleTree and vice versa, and the planner has a set date or time frame where they can host that event, that's all that it is. So we continue to lose because of those types of reasons, but people do want to meet in Billings. People love to meet in Montana. We just don't have the proper facilities to be larger than where we are right now. So I would say around 15%. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ripsis? Oh, we got you. Where did we, Councilmember Shaw, nothing else? I think we're done. Councilmember Bernice, something?
I do have a question because I don't know who said this, but you do the training, I think, for your for your employees for like the history of Billings and things like that. Is that something that is open to the public or even council members if they wanted to attend some of these trainings?
Thank you for the question, Council. Men, yes, please. We'd love to have you. We target it towards frontline employees, but we understand even if visitors are in contact with them, it might not always be the case where you're walking outside of a restaurant, you're catching somebody who you have a question for.
Right.
If you're a citizen and proud of the city, we'd love to have you around that table. And when we're looking at the Certified Tours Ambassador Program specifically, our field test is next week. We're going to be launching it in the summer, and as we're kind of going along that, we'll pass along all communications for it. But if you're a fan of Billings, we'd love to have you in the room.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you, Council. Oh, Councilmember Tiswold, are you still with us, and did you have any questions or comments?
I'm still with you, no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of that. Is there any public comment? No. Then that wraps up item number 1. And item number 2 is just a heads up on any future agenda items. Chris?
I'd just like to capitalize on one of the things that Alex shared, and that is, and there's a fair amount, all speculation, but a fair amount of conversation anticipating in the upcoming several years, not in the next few, but later, about meaningful tax reform in Montana. The data that you just heard about the part of the bed tax that goes to the state's general fund is exactly what's going to happen if cities aren't at the table engaged in the conversation. So I just want you to know, for the city manager meeting we hosted last week with the league, some of the other coalitions we've been a part of, we're prioritizing, as is the Chamber of Commerce. I got to attend their retreat today, as is the Chamber of Commerce, to be engaged in those conversations. It's nothing that I think is going to happen overnight, but if we're not at that table, then the state is going to find a way eventually, because our citizens are going to demand it around the desire to shift away from property taxes and over to a statewide sales tax, as foreign as that sounds, but we will be completely left out in the dark. They'll collect tens of millions of dollars out of Billings, and they'll send us back a ratio, like you heard, 10 million coming out and 500,000 or 600,000 coming back. 400?
It's about 5%.
Okay, so as we get engaged in that, it'll be a long play, but I think it's important that Billings and the other cities and towns be at that table and engaged in those. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that heads up. Appreciate it. Nothing else then on the way of future highlights? You should have your packet for Monday night. It's a thick one, so start reading now. Any items of council discussion? Then any other public comment?
Thank you.
No, we're adjourned, and thank you very much, everybody.